This time, everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Kyle, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Kyle.
Not a problem.
Is Bob Koskolowski talking? Is there any public comment? I did not get any written requests handed in to me, so there's no public comment at this time. Okay, Bob Koskolowski, again, number 4, approval of special meeting of February 19th, 2020. Whoever makes the motion, state your name.
Kyle, I make the motion.
I'll second it. Tom.
Tom, second it. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, 5-0. Okay, Bob Koskolowski, talk to the chief, management report.
Good evening, commissioners. Good evening, everyone that is on. Paul Sarkowski, Chief of Police. So I'll start off with the budget. The budget looks good at this point. As you probably all know, there's been a budget freeze pretty much from the beginning of the year. So the only thing really being paid out are the necessities, the everyday expenses, the bills, etc. There really hasn't been any unnecessary spending or any, discretionary spending, I should say. So all the line items. The only area of concern right now is the overtime account. There are some discrepancies in that line item. I spoke to Doug about that, the finance director. We're going to be going over that account and seeing where the shortages are. We believe it's probably mostly due to coding, meaning where some of the stuff was charged out to. Maybe some of the stuff should have been charged to training and it was charged to overtime. So I'm going to be working with Doug to kind of straighten that out if we can. However, the overtime account, we will probably be needing some type of transfer probably come May and June. We had several bodies out throughout the whole year, and it's not uncommon for us to be in this same position. So we'll get that straightened out, and then we'll, if we have to do a transfer like we always do, we'll do it probably May or June timeframe, depending on where we are with the numbers. This is our busy season now, April, May, and June. One thing to keep in mind right now, a lot of stuff is shut down and the officers are coming to work, which is a good thing. But at some point, they're going to want to use their time by June 30th. So I still expect that big influx of people taking time off and then obviously incurring overtime. So that's where we'll probably need the money to be transferred. As far as the current budget, I spoke to the chairman of the Board of Finance. He informed me the only thing they really cut, obviously, were the cars were cut that we requested. And again, they're going to let us buy additional cars at the end of the year if there's monies left over, and they'll transfer those monies if we need to. And then they eliminated $5,000 out of the 610 account. That's the general supply account. So he tells me that's the only things that have been cut. Everything else that we had in the budget, I mean, most of the line items were zeroed out anyways. So there were no big increases besides the salary accounts, and those are all contractual obligations. So, of course, that has not been finalized. Everything that's been going on the last 4 to 5 weeks with this pandemic, obviously there's a lot of unknowns at this point, if you will. So that's the update on the current budget. Our revenue projections, we projected like we always do to bring in a certain amount of income. Obviously, most of that income is from administrative fees for private duty. I mentioned a couple months ago that I don't think we'll make those fees. As we get closer to the end of the year, we're still showing we'll probably be in a deficit with that anticipated revenue. I'm hoping to minimize that as much as possible, but right now I'm looking at about probably a $20,000 deficit in that revenue. And if you look at the administrative fees, that's mainly where it is. Those admin fees are usually way over the amount that we project, but this year has been a very, very slow year. And even now with this pandemic, the last 4 or 5 years, you just don't see the amount of jobs and the construction being done on the road. So that definitely has an impact all around. So, again, we'll just see where the final numbers end, but I don't anticipate raising the money that we said we would raise in revenue. Just reviewing my notes. So that letter was sent to DPW for the speed limit signs on Mountain Road. That was done. Obviously, we did not meet last month, but that was done. Letter was sent to Mr. Falco on who requested those signs. We've been spending a lot of time, obviously, dealing with this pandemic. I think we'll discuss that a little bit later, but I just want to thank the community for the support. A lot of residents have stepped forward. They donated supplies, they donated masks, they donated gloves, sanitizers. And then obviously a lot of people, the businesses have been supplying food to the officers and the staff and personnel here. And we just want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts. It's been a very trying time for everyone, but what people have so graciously given us and showing the support goes a long way, and letting the officers and staff and employees know that coming to work during these times is very difficult, but it makes it a little easier when people are showing the generosity and the caring that they have. Let's see, I'm just trying to review my notes here. The Next Gen project, that continues to, the Next Gen project is our new CAD RMS system that has begun and that has started. Detective Matasovich and our IT person for the Rob Dyer for the town, they have been working on that. And that it's in the process. That's a 3 to 5 month process. So they continue to work on that and move that forward for us. During the last couple of weeks, we had a fatal motor vehicle accident. Just last week, this past weekend, we had an individual that was held up in his house and suicidal and self-inflicted wounds to himself. But that was a very tense situation, and everybody there did a tremendous job bringing that to a closure in a safe, in a way that we couldn't ask for a better outcome, where the individual, we were able to get him out of the house, get him to the hospital, and he survived his epidemic that he was going through. Thank you to obviously the EMS, the fire department. That was such a great team effort. These last several weeks have been nothing but a team effort by all the EMS, fire, police personnel. And that's what we have to do to get through these times and stick together. There's been a few minor motor vehicle accidents involving our cruisers. One was struck last night. I think I sent you a text late last night, but one of our officers' vehicle was struck last night. One struck a coyote the other night, driving around at midnight. So some of those cars received minor damage, but we'll get those looked at and repaired as necessary. And I think that's it for now. Statewide position's going very well. He's been keeping busy working on some cases in and around town. I know just the other day they worked on a case, and they continue to work on that case with a stolen gun and some drugs involved, and they're following up on that for us. I think that's it for now. So if anybody has any questions.
Okay, Bob Koskowski. Thank you, Chief. Do any board members, if you have any questions of the chief, just state your name and ask the question.
Yeah, Chief Tom Bennett. I had a couple of questions. Just wanted to talk to him about the incident, the barricaded subject. I had a couple of questions. Just kind of curious as to some of the things there.
Okay.
I know you said it came out to a good outcome. I'm glad to hear that. Just as a follow-up, how did you think this scene went with some of the officers that you had there? Do you think that they all had the proper training that was needed to handle a situation like that? I.e., I would imagine, did you guys negotiate with this individual? It sounded like you were there for 4.5 hours, so I'd imagine there was some negotiating going on. Do you have people trained in negotiations in the department? Is that something that you may need?
So yes, we've have people that
Chief,
went
just
through.
identify yourself, please.
Okay, yeah, Chief Setkowski once again. So yeah, obviously there was constant dialogue with the individual throughout that night, and we do have people that have gone to some of those classes as far as negotiations. Obviously, we're always looking to improve in those areas to get more people through classes such as those. But there was constant dialogue. There was, situation. Like I said, it was a good outcome. But there's always room for improvement. Obviously, most of the officers there are younger officers. You know, a lot of them only had 1 to 2 years on the job, so a lot of them have never faced a situation like that before. But I mean, those are the cards they were dealt with that night. But overall, I think everybody did a good job. And there's always room for improvement. We'll go over that a little more. I know the deputy chief and I had some discussions on some of those things, and we'll continue to make improvements in the future with some of that stuff.
Okay. And you said the guy came out of the house, so you didn't have to do a dynamic entry or anything, right?
No, so he didn't come out of the house, obviously. I mean, I'm not going to get too in depth of the situation, but going over for a period of time, we had constant interaction with the individual, constant monitoring, and then based on his actions, we kind of came up with a game plan and deployed, and we were able to obviously, I want to say probably wear him down, if you will, and then we were able to get inside the house and then take him into custody without incident.
Okay, excuse me 1 minute. State your names. Even when you go to talk again, just state your name if you're going to elaborate on the question, okay?
All right, Tom Bennett. So, Chief, just to follow up a little bit. So, do you feel as though that your people could use some? Well, you said you already have people trained in negotiation. So, I'd imagine as long as you're not having an issue with getting a person trained in negotiations there, where you would need people trained in that more, would you think that dynamic entry training, since you did have to go into the house, do you feel like your officers should have that type of training in the future to be able to respond to these type of situations with confidence?
Well, yeah, I mean, dude, like I said, a lot of them are newer, and so we have to. Oh, yeah, okay, Chief Setkowski once again.
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, due to their newness to the positions and inexperience, I mean, those are things we're gonna have to get more training, absolutely, in some of those areas. But based on the situation, the situation that we were dealt with, if the circumstances were different, then we would have took obviously different actions and did different things there that night. But I think we all felt comfortable with what we had presented to us and how we handled it. But like I said, there's always room for improvement. I mean, you can never have enough training in different areas, different topics, etc. So.
Okay, Chief, it's Tom Bennett again. Listen, I'm not questioning your judgment at the scene. I'm not questioning any of that. I just want to make sure that, these type of incidents, even though this one, I don't know the severity of it or where you would put it on a response level, but having a little bit of knowledge in this area, I always say that the more minor the situation, those are always the practice for the bigger situation. And if we find that we're having an issue with people not trained in dynamic entries or negotiating with barricaded subjects, or to take it a step further, equipment. I don't even know if you had the proper entry equipment, whether you have shields for your guys' use. And I think if you don't, that's stuff that we have to discuss because those are important. And along with that equipment comes obviously the training. I mean, we just obviously can't hand somebody a shield and or hand them a RAM without any training and say, go ahead and do this, because we want to make sure that all the officers are fully trained in that stuff. And I just followed up with the last question regarding this. Did you guys do an after action or a critique or a debrief of some kind? And is it normal course of business to do a written after action report, or do you just do like a verbal debrief critique afterwards?
It varies. I mean, there's been both in the previous, from previous incidences. This one we discussed, and as I said, I did need. Oh, sorry, Chief Setkowski. As I said, you know, there's been done both ways, verbal and then after action, I believe, when we had our ESU unit. But those are, like you said, more dynamic entries, different circumstances on some of those that we have done. But no, we still have to do some follow-up, speak to the officers, and then, yeah, do like an after action, if you will. So I believe the Deputy Chief and I had some of those discussions, so.
I have a question. Dave
Excellent.
Bitso.
Thank you, Chief.
Excuse me.
I have a question, if I may. Dave Bitso. Chief, just listening to you and Commissioner Tom going back and forth, you mentioned that there was a lot of newer rookies, if you will, on site at that situation. So it sounds to me like none of those had any negotiation training. Wouldn't it be something to consider to bring somebody from another shift that does have experience in negotiations to, you know, for a situation like that? Because I would think that the rookies that were on site didn't have any negotiation training, based on what I'm just hearing.
No, Chief Setkowski, no, they didn't, but Deputy Chief Rinaldi's been through some of those classes. Bob, if he wants to explain more.
Deputy Chief Rinaldi here. Yeah, I mean, I was there negotiating with them. I had a pretty good rapport with them. And then I had some other assistants. The one person that we do have that's a negotiator right now is out on long-term disability or injury. We did have a couple of people that have gone to basic negotiating class. One was working the shift, and we, could have used them maybe. But I believe based on what we were doing there, we had a pretty good rapport with the gentleman, and I've been to some of the classes. And I think we did the best we could. As far as the training, I mean, we've been ahead of the curve for years and years. I mean, we've done a lot of the training, tactically. We just have an influx of new people, and down the road, we're going to get them trained tactically.
Okay, Tom Bennett again. Listen, no criticism again, but I think the time to find out that we don't have a trained negotiator isn't the time when we have a barricaded subject. I think we always should be ahead of the curve, where if we know, we should have at least 2, if not 3 people that have trained negotiations. And the same thing with dynamic entries. I mean, if we don't have people trained in that, I'm a big proponent in, we got to get training to people, and they got to learn how to do this. I know dynamic entries are kind of above the skill level of a regular person who is only a year or 2. And I don't even know. I mean, in a debrief, we should be asking those people, were they comfortable with their level of training to be entering a house with a barricaded subject like that? So I think these are some of the things that I would feel confident that I think we should have answered before we're faced with another situation like this.
Deputy Chief Rinaldi, I agree with you, and we're going to work on it.
Okay, is that it? Bob Kosakowski, is there any other commissioners that have any questions to the chief? Okay, here, no more questions to the chief. We'll move on. Item number 6, Commissioners' comments. I'm going to start with John Duke. Do you have any comments?
Just early on here, I just want to acknowledge a couple things that, a couple positive things that I've seen. And the first one is the ballistic vest for the canine that was given through a, I don't know if it's a grant or a charity. I don't know what the right word is, but I thought that was pretty good. And I want to commend all the guys who worked the fatal fire on Derby Avenue. And since the last meeting, the fire on Maple Street and, or the fatal motorcycle accident, not fatal fire. But I just want to ask the chief or chiefs, are we seeing any upticks or any trends starting to develop, or is it too easy to determine if, you know, certain calls are going to start becoming the norm now with people's lack of getting out? Are we seeing any trends in, you know, drug dealing, or, you know, people doing any certain activities that you guys are starting to pick up on?
Deputy Chief Rinaldi here. I can answer that. It was quiet for a while as far as larcenies, vandalisms. It's still kind of quiet on that part. We've had a rise on domestic violence complaints. A couple weeks ago on a Friday night, we made 3 arrests based on family violence incidences. That's basically been the only thing right now. We've had a couple of larceny complaints. We had a couple of shoplifting from Stop and Shop recently, and that, again, that was quiet for a while. That's about it right now.
Okay. And then just Commissioner Duke, one more time. The only other thing that I wanted to ask is, as far as all the guys and girls, ladies that are responding with the new PPE that they've been issued, is there any problems with it? Do they feel they need any additional training? I mean, is it adequate? What are you guys seeing with that?
Deputy Chief Rinaldi here again. I mean, we've given masks, gloves. We got the face shields. You know, we're telling them to wear it before they go into a house on a call, or especially a medical call. The detectives have also been informed the same. We had an untimely last week, and a couple of the detectives went in with the proper gear, you know, when they were investigating the untimely. So yeah, I believe it's working out well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I don't have any other questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Bob Koskolowski. Kyle Kelly, you have any questions?
Not any questions right now. I'm sure I'll have some more later, but you know, these times are different for all of us, in not just the medical field or law enforcement, but just about everybody. And there's been a lot of stuff going on. The dynamic has been quite different and changing constantly. So, you know, I commend all the officers and everybody that's been doing a good job trying to stay on top of and assist and help and do their best in these times. The past few weeks have been crazy. You know, there's been a lot of great teamwork, as the chief said a little while ago. You know, I can speak to that on, you know, the EMS side of it. It's been, you know, it's been pretty substantial couple of weeks with what's been going on. But things have been going on very smoothly, and people have been working well together. I'd also like to add, you know, I've heard some riff back and forth about, you know, these parade type things that are going on, but as, you know, minuscule as they may seem to us, you know, it means a lot to our community. I think that, you know, they know we're still out there, and they know we still support them, you know, even though they can't get out there and do stuff. You know, I think that goes a long way, and, you know, having all the cruisers and the officers involved with that, you know, that goes a lot, as well as did it yesterday during that show of support at Griffin Hospital. So, you know, I'm sure I'll have some questions later on, but, you know, the department, keep pressing on, you know, as we get through these COVID-19 times, and, you know, we'll see on the other side.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Bob Koskolowski. Dave, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. I have a couple of comments. First of all, Dave Bitso, I'd like to thank the chief for the updates over the last couple of weeks, month or so, when things like the fatality happens or the hit and run last night. It's nice to be kept up to date on stuff like that. Deputy Chief Rinaldi, the Detective Bureau activity report that came over today, excellent. That's good to see that. I'm hoping that we'll see that once a month moving forward. I know this covered too much, and I thought it was a very information. It was a lot of good information. The one thing I'm a little disappointed in is that when this whole coronavirus thing started, basically the first week of March, there was no information coming to the board from the Seymour PD until I think, Bob, you had pushed for some updates, and finally on April 2nd we received a letter from the chief outlining some things. I just wish that we would have been kept up to date or in the loop a little bit better over those first 3 weeks. And I know in there it says, however, before the epidemic hit, this is from the chief in his letter, hit our state, I began working collaboratively with our local emergency management director, Tom Amy, HR director, along with Rory Burke and first selectman. But for 3 weeks, we didn't hear anything. And I called Bob a couple times. I know a few others had, and Bob, the chairman, had reached out to chief. But moving forward, I please keep us informed as to what's going on. I'm not asking you to, I'll leave it at that. We'll talk more about it later. Thank you.
Okay, Bob Koskolowski, my comments are, I just want to thank the First Selectman's office, Kurt Miller's office, and Anne Marie Dragonis, Deputy First Select Person, and Rory Burke for letting us set up this meeting tonight. We couldn't have done it without their help, so I just want to thank them personally for that. But I also want to thank all the first responders, the police, the ambulance, the fire department, and even the workers in the stores and everything, helping out everybody in the mailmen delivering letters, which are very important for people to get, I guess. So I just want to thank everybody for an outstanding job they did. Okay, I'm going to move on to old business.
Hang on one second, Bob. Tom Bennett here. Could I just
Yes, Tom, go ahead.
have a minute? Yeah, I just
Yeah.
wanted to follow up on some of the COVID stuff. And I just want to say I did get some emails from the chief there, kind of outlining what was going on, how they came about to be, for whatever reason. I did appreciate them, and I appreciated the info. It sounds like most members of the department are healthy at this point, and I'm glad to hear that. I hope their families are healthy also. And I guess I'd like to ask the chief, how are you guys doing right now with this? Are you guys facing any major issues right now? Chief?
Chief Setkowski speaking. No, we've been holding our own pretty well. As Commissioner Bitzel stated, I put together a letter. A lot of that laid out. I'm sure you had the opportunity to read that letter, but it kind of gives a timeline and the actions that we kind of took to right from the beginning. But we're down one officer. We were down 3 other officers. They all came back today. They were low exposure, if you will. So we put them out for a couple of days just as a precaution in conjunction with their what would be their weekend days off. 3 of them returned today, and one will be out till the April 20th. He had to be put out for 2 weeks. But other than that, everybody's been holding their own. Everybody's staying healthy, and I think everybody's taking the proper precautions. Wiping their vehicles down, going on calls, wearing the proper PPE, sanitizing after the calls, and then getting to washing stations. So. The custodian's been doing a tremendous job. The school custodians teamed up with the town custodians. They clean our building like 3 times a day, sanitizing everything. And I think that has played a major role. I think the officers cleaning their cars before shift or when they're working the desk, when they change hands, they're sanitizing in between usage. So a lot of precautionary measures have been taking place, and I think that's going a long way to keeping us healthy. As you know, it's a fluid situation, and I don't know, I know it's on the list to discuss more, but I mean, 2 hours from now, anything could happen where officers could be ill or our dynamics change. And then obviously we will have to adapt and adjust. And it's this continuous evaluation and assessment, and then making the proper adjustments from there. So we've been pretty fortunate, and I hope it stays that way.
Chief Tom Bennett again, just to, on that note, I know, listen, this is a very unique situation here. And in the end, when this is finally over at some point, or at least reduced to the point where we can have a little bit of normalcy back in life, are you guys going to be prepared to kind of update your exposure control plans, have an after action report as to what worked, what didn't work, talk about some of the issues you faced, such as personal protective gear, whether it was effective, not effective, had enough of it, didn't have enough of it, those type of issues? Are you and the deputy chief gonna plan on writing up after action report and revising some of your ECP plan there, just to kind of include this? God forbid we're ever faced with a situation like this, or one close to it.
Chief Setkowski speaking. Yeah, so obviously, we've been keeping some notes. We've been, documenting stuff. So yeah, in the end, we're gonna have to review, like you said, what worked, what didn't work, where can we improve. There's always room for improvement. As far as supplies go, I think we're in pretty good shape right now. When this pandemic hit, luckily we had the cleaning wipes, the sanitizers, the gloves, and that comes with obviously previous planning, right? So budgets and keeping stuff on hand and what we think we might need. And so right from the get-go, I think we've been in pretty good shape. And, orders have been placed, but we have not gotten those orders yet. It's a continuous issue with fire, EMS, the town. Obviously, we have a public safety committee, and we meet twice a week. Commissioner Kelly's on that committee, obviously being with EMS. But, right now our supplies are okay. So how long that'll last, don't know. I will say some of the supplies are starting to get a little low, and we're hoping obviously those are going to be restocked in the near future, sooner than later. But right now we're holding our own, we're doing well. And the key here is obviously personnel staying healthy, and if personnel stay healthy, then it makes everybody's job easier, if you will. But like I said, that could change at any time.
Tom Bennett again, thank you very much, Chief. I appreciate that being proactive, and I will yield back to Chairman Koskolowski.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Koskolowski. Number 7, old business, evaluation forms, review and take possible action, 1-year plan review, proposal and take possible action. I believe all board members got a copy of it and reviewed it. At this time, this is just my recommendation that I would like to recommend us to, if there's any changes that any board member thinks it should be, or the chief or the deputy chief thinks it should be changed in that, or the union think that things should be changed, and we could discuss this at our next meeting and take appropriate action, if that's okay with the rest of the board members.
David,
Yes,
so
Kyle.
Chief, you're talking about the evaluation forms?
No. No, I am.
I'm sorry, Chairman. Mr. Chairman,
Dave?
you talk about the evaluation
Yeah, I'm
forms?
talking about the evaluation forms and the 1-year plan review proposal and take possible action. That's the chief's. But just the evaluation forms, review and take possible action.
Well,
Dave Bitzel, you're the chairman of that board, so what's your input on that?
Well, Dave Bitso, my recommendation is that we move forward with it. We've worked on this for a number of months. Board members have been offered to add their thoughts into it. Some have. We've modified it. We've met. It can't get any more final than it is. So everybody has an electronic copy of both evaluation forms, one for the patrol and one for management. Caroline has an electronic one on that. I think we should roll that out. I'd like to make a recommendation or even make a motion that we roll that out and then the chief and the deputy chief could start planning for this process over the next 3 to 4 months.
Okay,
I don't see any reason to delay it another month.
okay, Bob Koskalowski. Dave, do you want to make that as a motion?
I'll make a motion. We move forward with the two evaluation forms that we've developed together.
Okay, Bob Koskalowski, do I have a second to Dave's motion?
John Duke, I'll second that.
Any discussion from the board members?
Kyle Kelly, the only thing I have, as long as everybody is on board, I believe that was in conjunction with the union and administration. So as long as everybody's happy with what came out, I'm in favor.
Okay, any other discussion? Bob Koskalowski, any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. State your name and say aye, please.
Kyle Kelly, aye.
Tom Bennett, aye.
John Duke, aye.
Dave Bitso,
Bob Koskalowski, aye. Passes 5-0. Next one, Bob Koskalowski to the chief. 1-year plan review proposal and take possible action, chief. Do you have that completed?
I'll speak to that if I can, Dave Bitso.
Yes, Dave.
Commissioner Duke and I met with the chief a couple times to develop that. Most, if not all, the input came from the chief. It's all very good stuff. Everything has a timeline on it. What I did do after Commissioner Duke and I spoke the other day, I extended the timeline out a couple months for a couple of reasons. One, given what we're going through right now, and two, we didn't have a meeting last month, so I'm not sure if you noticed that, Chief, but I pushed everything out a couple months. A lot of the stuff you had March's timeline, so I pushed it out to, I think, April, May, or May, June, I don't recall, but I didn't see a problem with that. I figured that's only in the best interest of everybody. So with that said, unless there's any changes that you want to make to it, Chief, I think we should move forward and accept that. And I also note that First Selectman did review it. And he also actually suggested, even before this all started, to maybe move the timeline out a little bit. And of course, with what's going on right now, it made a lot of sense. So unless the chief wants to add anything to it or make any changes, I'd like to suggest that we move forward with that as well, so that we have a roadmap in place and something to work something to work off of.
Okay, Dave. Chief, Bob Koskalowski, Chief, do you have to add anything to that?
So Chief Sadkowski, prior to the meeting, I was reviewing some of my notes when I was going over that. I think there's one item that's not on that sheet, and I think that had to do with overseeing the evaluation process. Implementing and overseeing the evaluation process, I think, was the only other one that is not on that list. So I just bringing that to your attention and reviewing my notes from the meeting we had. So
Okay, Dave Bitso, I mean, we could add that, Chief, if you like. I basically was just all I did was modify the timelines. I didn't take anything off or add anything on, so we could add that on. Sure. You want to make it number 8?
I believe so. Number 8, or yeah, I'll revise it and send it out to you, but we can just add it now, I believe. I think that was on my original notes, as I stated. So
Okay. I mean, that would be part of I would think your responsibilities anyways as chief to oversee that whole process, but if you want to put it on there, that's fine. That's fine.
well, I'm just telling you our discussion with Commissioner Duke.
Hey, guys,
and,
just remember to
so-
state your name when you're talking.
Sorry. Dave Bitso.
Chief Sadkowski, I'm just reiterating to the fact that when I had my meeting with Commissioner Bitso, Commissioner Duke, I think that was one of the things we discussed. So that's why I bring it up today, because I know it wasn't on the list. So
Okay.
inadvertently left off.
Tom Bennett here.
Okay, Bob Koskalowski, Dave, you want to make that a motion?
I'll make a motion that we move forward with this 1-year goals for Chief Sadkowski with the addition of overseeing the process for evaluations of officers and management.
Tom Bennett here, Mr. Chairman. Could I just ask, I know some of the items, I went over them on the list. Could I just ask for like a brief description of what some of them are? As far as like one, their the purchasing of heavy equipment kind of thing, just so I have so for my own education as to what they are and go through each one, just so I kind of know. Listen, obviously the the enhancement of a social media, that's kind of easy, but there was something about supernumerary officers in there, filling a deputy chief's position. Like what's expected, just so I have a little bit of an idea for myself, so I know like what your guys' thought process was on that.
Mr. Chairman, I believe you need a second of that motion before you can discuss it. I did
Yeah,
not.
do I have a second to that motion? Thank you. Dave Bitzel made the motion. Do I have a second to the motion?
John Duke, I'll second that.
Okay, now, Bob Koskolowski, Chairman, Chief Tom Bennett asked you a question. Can you just read it, the items he's talking about?
Yeah, so Chief Setkowski speaking. So 1 and 2, that came from the town. So the town had a strategic planning committee, and I guess from the Board of Selectmen, they met and then they came up with criteria for each department. So that was pushed out to each department. And so 1 and 2 basically came from that strategic planning committee from the town and the Board of Selectmen. So we added that to the list. So now that's something I'm going to have to review and so comply with the request for the municipal strategic plan. They're looking for 10 years. What heavy equipment inventory replacement, 25,000 or plus. So I will go through this building, go through our equipment, see what may or may not be replaced. It could be radios, could be console system. I think the biggest upgrade we just did now with the computer CAD RMS system. But so that's something what we'll be looking at. The same thing is, 10-year light equipment inventory replacement plan. So again, I'll be reviewing all that equipment from my office all the way down to the patrol level to see what needs to be replaced over the course of 10 years and make these improvements as requested. Number 3 is, the budget, create, present, and maintain the budget for the Board of Finance and Department. Our discussions were, I kind of already did that, we're already into this time frame. So, and then that's obviously a continuous process throughout the year. So that's where that comes in. Number 4, create and implement new procedure in conjunction with Finance Department to increase collection. The private duty invoices was brought to our attention from when I presented the budget that the town is in arrears and collecting some of the fees from private vendors. So in speaking with the Finance Department, I think the First Selectman's office, we're looking to improve how we, when we submit the billing and invoices, make improvements as to getting paid for those invoices and trying to stay on top of that. So I've asked some questions in my past, probably 18 to 20 months as chief. And so again, we're going to come up with hopefully a new procedure and a way to, we don't have as many outstanding invoice bills to the town and get that money and return to the town at a sooner rate. So I'll be working with the Finance Department, the First Selectman's office, and obviously my administrative assistant who does all the billing and invoices. So that'll be something to work on. Initiate community outreach programs for the public. One of them we discussed was, I think it had to do with the Ring portal for law enforcement and getting the community involved with that. And then obviously through that law enforcement portal, people are able to log on. So I've been in contact with company representatives. We're looking to, have rediscussion on that and then implement that program with the public, no matter what camera you have. So that's a community initiative. Obviously, we do some others throughout the year, but that was one of the ones we mentioned there. Number 6, we currently have a deputy police chief's position open. I explained to the board I would like to see that filled. I explained to the 2 commissioners, but I might as well, I would like to see that filled. It's an important position for many reasons. And so I said I would work with them to come up with criteria. And some of that's already in place, the criteria, but I think we need to have discussion about backfilling that and the importance of backfilling that. And then obviously enhance or increase supernumerary personnel. And we talked about, obviously, we're in the South Central Criminal Justice Regional process for entry levels. And, it's preparing people for the future. So in the past, we have hired supernumeraries. We used to have a great number of supernumeraries. Those have decreased over the years, but that's our base. And then obviously when there's an opening when someone retires, that gives us a foundation to obviously pull people from the supernumerary ranks and make them full-time almost instantaneously. So that's another whole process that we would like to get involved in. And then obviously increase social media communications through social media platforms. I think we started doing that. Getting more information out to the public was one of the goals. But then we're going to start looking at maybe applying that to different platforms to enhance that. So that's how we kind of came up with some of those goals and initiatives. And by doing that will help improve overall the department and communications. And so hopefully that answers your question. Or
Tom Bennett again. Thank you very much, Chief. Those are some excellent goals there. And I appreciate the time. And back to the chairman.
Okay, Bob Koskolowski, is there any other discussions on this motion? All in favor, just state your name and yes or no.
Dave Bitso, aye.
Kyle Kelly, aye.
John Duke, aye.
Tom Bennett, aye.
Chairman, I believe it passed 5-0.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. Brian.
Okay. Okay, moving on the agenda, Bob Koskolowski, moving on the agenda. I'm going to do A, B, C, D, and E all at once. Patrol report, detective report, K-9 report, SRO report, car report. Do any of the commissioners have any comments on any of those 5 issues?
I got one question based on the accident
State
last
your
night.
name.
Kyle Kelly, sorry. Chief, I know there had been some talk, I guess, of the K-9 vehicle that was involved in a crash last night. The damage on that, is that something that's worth taking care of, or is that something we should look at replacing the vehicle?
Chief, Bob Koskolowski, Chief, do you have any comments on that?
Chief Sakowski speaking. So I was told it was minor damage. I did not see the damage or pictures of it yet. Obviously, the K-9 officer was in training today. He briefly stopped in my office. He was with Deputy Chief Rinaldi. My main concern that he was okay. He's okay. And then he discussed basically how the incident unfolded. And then he never really said, from what I was told, the vehicle is drivable. And so right now, I think it's more cosmetic than anything. So I don't think that vehicle would need to be replaced at this time. So
Not just
I'll
Kyle.
have the damage evaluated and then probably get it fixed. But like as I said, I was told it was minor damage and the vehicle was drivable. So.
Okay, Bob Koskolowski. Kyle, did you get your answer?
Yep, Kyle again, that's good. I appreciate that. And Deputy Chief Rinaldi, that was, I like that format for your report for the DB. Thought that was pretty sweet and to the point. So thank you.
Deputy Chief Rinaldi, thank you.
Bob Koskolowski, Chairman, do any of the board members have any other comments on those 5 items? Okay, Bob Koskolowski here, no more comments. We'll go to number 8, new business.
Chief Setkowski, I just want to explain some few things.
Okay, go ahead, Chief. Bob Koskolowski,
So,
go ahead, Chief.
someone mentioned, I think Commissioner Duke, Chief Setkowski speaking, Commissioner Duke did mention about a vest being donated. Officer Gallo and I believe Officer Oskowski, they reached out to an organization to supply a new vest to the new K-9, and I think they're going to donate an additional one to K-9 Zor. So we're very grateful to that organization, and I see Officer Oskowski's on if he wants to comment on that or explain further.
John, do you want to explain,
Yep, John.
just state your name?
Yep, John Skowski. Yeah, we did reach out. Officer Gallo did get his donated. I was approached by somebody who lives in town. They are interested in donating one for me for K-9 Zor. The vest is a new vest where we can leave it on the dogs. We don't have to waste time with putting a harness on the dog if we get a hot call. It's just a grab and go kind of vest. It is stab proof and bulletproof. It's just it's half the size of the ones we have now. So it's about a 90-day lead time for the vests. So we are working on them.
Tom Bennett here, John. How much does one of those vests cost?
So they approximately $1,200.
John Oskowski talking.
Yep.
Okay, John, Bob Koskowski. John, go ahead. You could finish commenting. Just state your name when you talk.
Yep, John Oskowski. Yeah, they're about $1,200 a vest.
Yep. Board members have any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, Deputy Chief Rinaldi here. Just a couple other things too. Is for the SRO part, we have the officers, the 2 school resource officers are in patrol right now on day shift. That's why we don't have a report due to the fact of what's going on and the schools are closed. Also, we did go through training last month with hazmat, bloodborne pathogen training. All the officers are all the officers on the patrol, as well as the detective division, as well as myself and the chief, went through the training, as you can see on the form here. And that's it. That's all I have right now.
So
Okay,
Chief
Bob
Sapkowski again, just on the car report, the new vehicles that we have been waiting for the past, I believe 10 months have arrived. And I will be working with the vendor to get those outfitted, and as soon as we can, put them into service. So it's probably going to be about another month. I know with this pandemic and epidemic, I think some of the supplies on the back end might be delayed, if you will, but we're going to be working with the vendor to get those outfitted as soon as possible. But they're in our lot, and that was the main thing that we had to deal with.
Okay, Bob Koskowski, thank you. Is there any other comments from the commissioners or chief, deputy chief?
Chairman Tom Bennett again. I just wanted to follow up. I think I lost you guys on the vest thing. Did I hear the price right? $1,200 a vest for the dogs?
John Oskowski, yes, it was $1,200 per vest. Yep.
Tom Bennett again. And you said you're looking for donations from the public on that. Has the department ever purchased vests for dogs in the past? And that could be answered by anybody, whether it's John or the chief or the deputy chief.
John Oskowski, the last set of vests that we got, they were donated. The seniors had done one, and Rich Kearns' son had donated the other one. That was the last set that we got. So Rich Kearns had reached out again to this new style vest. He's willing to donate a portion of it. And there was a $200 difference that we had left.
Tom Bennett here again. Obviously this is something we need for the dog. It's a piece of equipment the dog could use. Is there a reason why we're waiting for donations? And is this something that should be purchased by the department to keep the dog safe out there? And again, directed to anybody, whether the chief or yourself wants to answer that, John.
Yeah. So John Oskowski, Gallows vest for his dog, it's already paid for. It was done by the company providing the vest. They did a fundraiser, and he was awarded the vest. So there was no cost to the department at that side. And like I said, Rich Kearns was going to donate the $1,000 from his son's company. So money-wise, we're just the $200. That's all we're short right now.
Again, Tom Bennett here. Is this something the department can kick in the rest of the funds, Chief, is there a reason that we can't, as a department, pay for that? To match those funds?
Chief Sekowski, no. So generally, we leave it up to the K-9 officers to obviously tell us whatever equipment they need. And I believe they wait to a certain age for the dog, right? I mean, so Officer Gallo's dog, I believe, was 11 or 12 months. I think they usually like to let the dog get a little older, but and make sure it's full grown. And that's my understanding. But and then, you know, they always seek the you know, the equipment they need, and then we have discussions. And then obviously anything we could get donated to save the town and department money, we try to do that. And I think the K-9 officers do a great job doing that. So mostly they have been allowed to seek the funding and resources, and then they usually let us know. Like this one here, I didn't even know they were doing it, and then they told me that they got the donations, and you know, so it works out. So, but no, if it's a money issue, we do have money, and you know, as far as a K-9 account, we got money in that account from donations, and then we use that, you know, money to supplement whatever's not covered. So.
Tom Bennett again. Excellent. I like the initiative of the two K-9 guys. Strong supporter of the K-9 program. And I guess I'll be blunt and right to the point. Listen, I don't think we should wait for those extra donations as much as they help the department. I think I'd rather, if it's appropriate, to purchase the vet, the dogs now, and that's all we're waiting for is $200. And even if it's more than $200, listen, I'm willing to go on record. I'll make a motion that we supply these dogs with vests if is appropriate, rather for funding for them outside.
Hey, Bob Koskolowski, at this time, Tom made a motion for the department to fund the balance of the funds for the vest for the K-9s. Do I have a second to that motion?
John Duke will second that.
Okay, John Duke, second that motion. Bob Koskolowski again. Is there any comments?
Chief Setkowski.
Yes.
So just to clarify, K-9 Zor currently has a vest, but this would be an upgrade. So his vest is still good, but they're just looking to upgrade it. So that 200, you know, just to clarify, both dogs will have vests. And John's K-9 Zor has a current vest, which is still valid. It just would be an upgrade. So it's not really an emergency situation for the second K-9. If I'm understanding it correct, John, I mean, you do have a vest that was probably only about 1.5 years old, if that, 2 years. I'm not sure if you want to explain, John, but it would be an upgrade, definitely. It's a lighter, newer material, but that's only my only comment. So both of them would have them.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, it's Brian Leclerc. I think the motion was in the plural, vests for the K-9s in the plural. I guess if you could ask the movement just to articulate the motion. Is this for the additional funding for one vest or two vests? So you're all clear what the motion actually is for.
Bob Koskolowski, Tom Bennett, was it for one vest or two vests?
I'm going to say the one vest. That's my understanding. I thought we said the other dog just, he already got a vest.
John Oskowski, that's correct. One is paid for. It's all set. He'll see his in 90 days. The second one, we're still waiting on the other $200. With regards to my dog having a vest, like I said earlier, he did receive a vest. The new one is half the size, and it's something that it's more of a grab and go. The dog would wear it most of the time on shift, so we don't have to waste time putting a vest on him. It would already be on him. We can has different points for attaching leashes, and you can do a lot of different things with that collar being on him.
Okay, so the motion, Bob Koskolowski, the motion is for one vest to come up with the funding for the remainder of the money. Correct?
That is correct. This is Tom Bennett. That's correct.
Okay, a motion was made and was seconded by John Duke. Any other discussion?
This is John Duke. I think for $200 to have two similar vests that are same manufacturer, with the same style and use between the two of them is better than having two different vests for a minimal investment. I can't see why we wouldn't move forward with that.
Okay, thank you, John. Bob Kosklowski, any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. State your name and say aye.
Dave Bitzel, aye.
1, 2,
John Duke, aye.
3.
Tom Bennett, aye.
And Bob Kosklowski, aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 8, under new bit, is there any other comments on those 5 items? Okay, Bob Kosklowski, number 8, new business, department readiness for COVID-19 and update, and plan for COVID-19 for staffing and contingency plan for lack of patrol and administration. Chief, this would be a question to you. Just how ready are we, just in case, because it came up earlier on something else that, like even when we're negotiating hostage or something like that, it came up, do we have enough personnel to handle the situation? So these two comments are really for you. How ready are we for COVID-19 update, which you usually give us an update, so we're pretty knowledgeable on that one. But on the second one, do you have any plans in place if something happened where COVID-19 affected a number of the patrolmen?
Chief Setkowski speaking. So, department readiness, I think we were as ready as we're going to be, just like any other department. Obviously, this incident boils down to how does it affect your manpower, right? So, like I said, it's a very fluid situation, and right now everybody is healthy, everybody's staying healthy. But like I said, that could change in an hour, a day, a week. So keeping all that in mind, it all depends how it starts affecting us, right? So right now I'm down 1 officer, and that officer will be back next week. Obviously, if it starts, those numbers start increasing, if they increase dramatically, then that could start being a problem. So if that occurs, obviously it will be hands on deck. And then we'll look at where it affects us, what shifts, what personnel are affected, and then we'll have to make those proper adjustments. I really can't say right now as to, and what I mean by that is if you lose an officer a shift, and 2 officers a shift, okay, obviously anytime you lose bodies, it's going to increase your overtime, right? So right now we have enough people. We've been down probably in past years with people out on sick leave and comp and everything. We've been down over 25% of our department for other reasons, not with a pandemic. So I kind of know what those numbers are. I'm not going to explain that on a public meeting for obvious reasons when you're talking security. And obviously you don't want the public to know what those security plans are. So we're monitoring this on a regular basis, and then depending on how it affects our departments, then we will make those proper adjustments. But if we start losing bodies, it'll be all hands on deck, and that includes maybe reassigning people from other divisions. And we might have to go to emergency staffing, but the officer has been informed on very early on in this crisis to, hey, listen, we're all in this together. You're going to be called upon if not only if our bodies start dropping. So we have mutual aid compacts. We have mutual aid compacts with 20 plus towns in the South Central region. So if our bodies start going down, then obviously we would reach out to those compacts with other cities and towns if we need to. You have the state police. And then obviously we have the South Central Regional Contingency Blue Plan. Those plans are in place that we have, and same thing, that's reaching out to our other community partners. But they have variables in all this too. So we might be called upon to assist them in their departments. They might be called upon to assist us in our departments. So we obviously continue to monitor this in our region 2, the South Central region. We have a Slack channel that we communicate on almost daily, and different questions, different events come up, and then there's discussion amongst the chiefs of police on that Slack channel. So those are kind of some of the updates as far as personnel readiness goes. Like I said, if you lose a whole shift, then obviously, you know, that changes big dynamics, and then you got to go to maybe emergency staffing, or you got to move bodies around and or bring in those personnel, right? So we have 2 supernumeraries that are available to work. You know, we would obviously try to backfill with them if possible, but if you lose bodies, obviously that's going to increase over time. There's just no way around that. So.
Okay, Chief. Thank you. What I like to do is, Bob Koskowski, what I like to do is turn this, Kyle, you're one of the first responders as far as the ambulance go. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations that we in the police department could do and help the chief? And so I'll go get through this in case something does happen.
Yeah, there's a couple things. I fortunately, you know, have been.
Kyle Kelly talking.
Sorry, Kyle Kelly. I've fortunately been privy to a lot of the back end discussions with the rest of the town department heads, you know, as far as planning and what we're doing ongoing. Something I have mentioned, Chief, that I think would benefit the entire department is everything that has been done thus far, and everything, not necessarily everything, but some of your ideas moving forward. I think you need to put it on paper. I know you have like a read and sign type setup, and I think all of that as far as what the directives are, right? A mask and face protection on every call, especially medical calls. You know, putting masks on prisoners, cleanliness and cleaning the cars and cleaning your hands as much as possible. All of those things, I know you guys have had different discussions during roll call and put that stuff out, but I think it's imperative that you put all of that stuff on paper, 1 by email and 2 by posting it, you know, at a local communication area within the PD, whether it's in, you know, the what's the room I'm thinking of, people? Somebody help me.
Muster.
The what?
Muster room?
But the room
What
in
you
the back
call?
there. Anybody? Really? Somebody?
Oh, you're doing good by yourself.
Rinaldi?
Anyway,
Roll call.
the roll call room. Thank you. Yeah, you know, I know that there's been some discussion down there, but I think everything that's been talked about needs to be posted and needs to be emailed out, so there's never a question. To that also, I, for one, don't have any problem with beards, right? There's a big discussion with beards and going on and yada, yada, yada. But right now it's a different set of circumstances. And I know there's some officers that have beards and have doctor's notes. But it's my personal recommendation that if they're going to keep their beards in, during this time, that they understand the fault putting a mask on that has, and the fact that it does not maintain a seal and does not protect them, and they need to be aware of that, and they need to sign a piece of paper stating that, or they shave. One of the two. You know, that's my personal feeling. I get it. I like beards. I had my beard, you know, but I shave because I know I need to make sure I have a good seal so I'm not getting sick. You know, and I think that needs to be disseminated out to, you know, whoever in the department is currently has a beard and they have a doctor's note to do so. That's fine. I don't have any problem with that, but they need to understand that that's not adequate protection. As far as that, I think there's other things coming down as far as cleanliness and cleaning. But the biggest thing is making sure that everybody is on the same page. There's no question about it, and everybody has the things that they need to have. Everybody needs to understand there's also a lack of PPE, not just in our town, not just in our region, not just in our state, but nationwide. So we're doing the best we can, and people need to take care of their equipment, take care of their masks. You know, that's another thing that needs to be explained. If you have a mask, take care of it. Wear a surgical mask over your N95. Make sure it's not getting dirty and broken and soiled. If it does, request a new one. But all these things that are coming out as far as directives and conversations and roll call, you know, directives, those things need to be put on paper. I've done it in my place. You know, I know other services and departments have done it. But this way, there's never a question. And Everybody needs to cover themselves and everybody needs to be protected. So that's my 2 cents, and I'm willing to help. I already have stuff on paper as far as what we do. I know we've talked about a couple of things, and we're all trying to work together as far as PPE and masks and eye protection. But I think the biggest thing is everybody needs to be on the same page and everything needs to be on paper, so there's no question about it.
Okay, Bob Koskowski, thank you, Kyle. Bob Koskowski, a chief, one of the recommendations Kyle made, which I think is a good recommendation, is officers that, because of medical reasons, they're growing beards. There's a couple of them, to make sure that they sign off, letting them know that the beards could affect the safety wearing that mask. It might not protect them as much as if they didn't have the beard.
All right, so Chief Sakowski. So yeah, we had that discussion, Commissioner Kelly, myself. I ran this by HR because obviously that's what they're for, right? They're a resource in the department, and so I think they touched base with legal department, and I'm not really sure why, but they basically said, you know, putting that in writing with the beards, and it doesn't really, I don't want to say limit our they basically told me it doesn't limit the liability to the town. That if they still are exposed or whatever, then it's not really going to change anything as far as just by them signing that paper. That's what was portrayed to me, if you will. So,
Chief, if I must, this is Kyle again. I personally, and this has come up a million times about HR and whatever, and I know there's been discussion of they're not part of the police department or whatever. I personally don't care what HR said. I think the police department needs to have on paper, and those officers need to sign it. It may not protect us in the long run, but it's going to help. It's going to help to cover if it comes down to it. And you look anywhere about those masks on OSHA regulations or the manufacturer's regulations. When you do fit testing with those masks, any of these masks, you need to be clean shaven. So I think that needs to be on paper, regardless of what HR says.
Thank you, Kyle. Bob,
I'm not disputing that.
Bob Koskowski,
but,
Chairman, Chief.
Yep.
The whole issue here is to protect the officers. Forget about the liability. We're going to be liable no matter what. It's to protect the officers that have the beards, to let them be aware that this beard could cause more of a chance of getting something versus not having the beard. So that's what the whole issue is protecting the officer.
Chief Sakowski, I agree 100%. I'm not disputing that. I'm just having discussion about, what's the benefit of them signing off on it is the question. So that's what came into play. They're making them sign a piece of paper.
This is Kyle. At the very least, it lets them know that they're not protected.
Hey, Bitso, it acknowledges that they were told.
I understand that. I don't know, Brian, do you have any comment? Chief Sakowski speaking. I don't know the town attorney. I mean, what's your take on this? Or
Well, I could tell you that if the question is legally, does so advising members of your department that they should wear, they should not, that if they have facial hair and wear a mask, they may potentially expose themselves more than an officer who has no facial hair with a mask. Whether that will assist you legally, I don't know that will make a difference in it if there's a workers' compensation claim being brought. I think Mr. Kelly's question may be, is it just a better practice just to warn the officers, the gentlemen, that, for their own health and safety, that they may not be protected as well should they have facial hair and try to wear the mask. I think it's two different questions. One is legally, will that protect the department? Probably not. Practically, is it something that you should tell your officers if you have not told them already? There's no downside to advising them.
Thank you, Bob Koskowski, Chairman, Chief. But basically, you have to put it on record that the officers were notified of this. That's all, so they know for their health and safety. Because if they get something and they're working with another officer, they could just spread it to the other officer. Okay, here are no other comments. Uh,
Mr. Chairman, Tom Bennett, I want to follow up with one question.
Sure, Tom.
And I'm not sure who I posed this to, whether I posed this to you or to the chief. And it comes to mind because there is a department in Connecticut that is actually facing this same scenario right now. Do we have a defined chain of command within the department in the worst case scenario that the chief and the deputy chief would contract something that would put them unable to perform their duties? Where would we go beyond that? Does the commission is there some sort of defined chain of command beyond that, and is it in writing so that, God forbid, something should happen, we're prepared ahead of time to deal with that?
Chief, did you want to answer that?
So Chief Sadkowski, so obviously the chain of command is me. So it comes up whether, I've been given capabilities to work from home. Some departments are doing that now with administrators, right? So they either come in a portion of the day or part of the day and then go home, or a lot of them are working from home. So I now have those capabilities. So, I mean, is that something we want to review? If, God forbid, I should, be not feeling well, I would still obviously be operating from my home. I have all the same capabilities I have here. But if obviously it was severe enough, then Deputy Chief Rinaldi would have to take over the reins of the department. But if for some reason it was both of us, then, every day it just goes down the chain of command from that point onward. And then similar to when we're not here. But long term, it's probably not a good thing. So there's some other options that we're reviewing currently. And, retirees are allowed to come back, if you will. So, that's an option. We just had a deputy chief retire. It's something just to consider. He just left with 27 years of experience, 2 years almost up here as at the higher level administrator. He has the experience and knowledge. That's an option that we could explore to, so a retiree, from what the state has said, a retiree could come back without being penalized on their pension. So that's just some thoughts being thrown around right now, just conversation with myself and the deputy chief. And I bring that to the board's attention tonight. That's a possibility to, lately what I've been doing is coming to work, sitting in my office, trying to minimize interactions, obviously, to minimize hopefully staying healthy and, preventing infection or passing on, not just from them, but from me to them. And I think it's been working. I don't know if that helps you out or.
Tom Bennett again, Chief. I appreciate that. And like I said, I asked the question because there was a real life scenario unfolding here inside of Connecticut. I'm not going to get into the details of what's happening personally with somebody, but the number one in charge of the department is unable to fulfill their duties at this point, and it's a small department. They're down to less than 10 officers because so many are sick in the department at this point. So I just feel as though I want to bring it to the board's attention, because if something does happen when you have a department with limited personnel, we need to know who would take the reins. And I do like the suggestion of the deputy chief who just retired. But there are other options. And then I would say that your commanders, I don't know if your commanders are ranked in order as to who would assume those duties after, if something should ever happen to yourself or Bob.
Chief Sadkowski, yes. So through the chain of command, obviously, it would be currently the way we have would be the chief, the deputy chief, the inspector, and then down to the commanders. The inspector is currently out, so now you're into the commanders. So the commanders, they're usually done by seniority, and so you do have seniority rank in the highest ranking commander. Obviously, he has advanced courses, if you will, in executive mid-management, and we're looking to get him further. So he's currently on a list for like the FBI Academy. And so, when we talk about training, and that's why, I'm going to bring up now, backfilling an administrative position, that's why these positions are important. And that's why the department, I believe, always had to be administrative position, non-union positions. This is a perfect example of why, okay? So when you have one or two or three administrators, if something happens to one, you still got 2 and 3. If something happens, so you have another body there, and then obviously then farther down your rank structure. Our job is to prepare people for the future, right? So that's why I think it's imperative that we need to backfill that deputy chief's position and start preparing people for the future. And when people get promoted and move up the rank to these executive positions, then obviously training comes along with that, advanced training, and then preparing them for the future. So that's why I bring that to your attention again. So
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, Commissioner Duke, I just like to ask the chief something.
Who's that?
Commissioner Duke,
State your name.
John
Oh, yes,
Duke.
go ahead. I'm
All
sorry.
right, Chief, I'm all for preparing people, but I think we're past the preparation stage at this point. And has there been any consideration in staggering staffing inside the building and maximizing the amount of people who could work remotely? Is this being done? I mean, because I think once one person actually tests positive, it's going to be too late for to really, it'll cause a big scramble with what we know about this virus so far. So would it be a benefit to have less people staffing the building, working remotely, maybe not have both the chief and the deputy chief in the building at the same time, and maybe having one detective on duty in the bureau and the rest working remotely if they have the capability, versus waiting for somebody to get sick and then scrambling to figure out, when you're trying to trace who was with who and where they were and possible other exposures. Would it be smarter just to, at this stage in the game, start separating people?
So Chief Setkowski, yeah, I mean, we've had some of these discussions, and but right now, it hasn't really been a problem, right? So if you're talking about our detectives, I mean, yeah, there's one detective is staggered, but then there's, I think we meet the threshold. If you want to talk about social distancing, all their desks are far enough apart. Even though they're in the same room, they are spread out. If you use the 6-foot distance, and obviously we're encouraging those things. As far as putting them on different shifts or remotely work from home, I'm not sure how much they're going to be able to do from home for their positions, if you will, because they're following up on investigations. They could do some of it maybe, but not all of it. So we can review more of that, but we have not implemented any of that at this point in time, and I didn't really see a need right now, or but that's what we're here to discuss if you want. But
Kyle, just a recommendation and a thought, not necessarily for the DB. I mean, that's a whole nother something to discuss. I mean, you see what happened to Ansonia, right? One of their guys got tested positive. They shut down the whole DB. Everybody quarantined. That being said, the administration, needs to be looked at kind of separately, right? Myself, I've been doing a majority of my work as much as I can from home, right? I still have to go out on calls here and there. I go to my office once in a while if I have to, spend a couple hours in there. But I'll try and, segregate myself as much as I can. But maybe it's something to look at for you and the deputy chief to, alternate days both of you have a setup that you can work from home. You know, you got to admit, and this is me just on an assumption, on any given day, you guys are in each other's office, you know, probably closer than 6 feet, talking whatever's going on. And let's face it, Chief, if you become sick or you test positive and, you know, we trace it back for a day, Deputy Chief's going to be out too, right? You know, so maybe looking at alternating your days with yourself and the Deputy Chief, you know, every other day, something along those lines or something, I think wouldn't hurt, right? To make sure you have some level of protection, at least in the administration, especially having your number 3 out right now for a while, you know, until he comes back. You know, he's got the experience to run the department, you know, throwing it to one of the commanders right now. If both of you guys are out, no, not saying that they can't do it, but.
Dave Bitzel, I got a comment on this. I'll throw into to a pot of soup. I'm very concerned about the Detective Bureau. Chief, I know you said their desks are 6 feet apart, but they're not 6 feet apart from each other as they're walking by each other. That's a very small room for 6 people or 5 people. You're in a big office all by yourself, and you're talking about working from home. I would like to see something done with the Detective Bureau to split them up. Maybe have 3 of them working from home and spread the other 3 out in the office. But I really think you're right. There's no issue now, but once it happens, it's going to hit fast and hard and furious, and it's going to be too late.
This is Kyle again. I understand the point of the Detective Bureau working from home. Is it possible to find another area in the building that you can, you know, safely separate them? You know, even if you're using the training room upstairs, there shouldn't be any training going on up there anyway, right? You use that room to space everybody out, and even the room downstairs, set them up with laptops or even their desktop computers for the next month to at least keep them, you know, spread out decently. I mean, you're not gonna, you know, I know what Dave's saying, but to, you know, to everybody, you're not gonna stop everybody getting in each other's face, you know, whether it's in the dispatch room, the dispatch center, or you know, the roll call room, but at least for the guys in the DB who may be sitting there for a few hours at a time together, you know, if we maybe split them up and, you know, we use some other areas of the department to get them set up to work from and maximize the space, you know, as much as you can between each other, that might be something to help. Again, just my 2 cents.
Chief Sadkowski, so this is the first I'm hearing of anybody having concerns about working in the Detective Bureau, but I don't have a problem. And I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of departments are splitting their Detective Bureaus. What does that mean? They're done, you know, they have a day shift and then a 3 to 11 or a 2 to 10. We currently have a 12 to 8. So you know, if there's concerns about them working together, I mean, no one has brought it to my attention. This is the first I'm hearing it. It kind of sounds like they had a conversation maybe with some of you, but I don't have a problem moving them. We have 2 interview rooms. I can move someone over there. We could social distance more. We could isolate them more, but that's only as good as the employee that takes that initiative themselves. And we obviously, even on calls of service, okay, we've been recommending, you know, not jeopardizing officer safety, but obviously officers, even when they're on calls, to use the proper PPE. Only a certain amount of officers go to certain calls. And, you know, I had a situation yesterday with a shoplifter and stuff. So I look out my window, I see some of it go down. And then people are going there that probably should never even been there. And they just, for lack of better words, self-dispatch themselves, if you will. So, I mean, the employees have to kind of take that initiative and do that for their own safety as well. But I will have discussion with Deputy Chief if we need to move some detectives around, if that's the concern, and isolate them better. I don't have a problem doing that, and or split their shifts like other departments are doing. You know, those are all things we can review. So.
Okay, Commissioner Koskolowski, any other comments?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Duke. I just want to follow up with the chief. I don't know where you're coming from with the, you know, we talk to people. That's not the case. My point is, I want to minimize the amount of personnel in the building before any sickness runs through the building. That was my point. There's no conspiracy here to where anybody doesn't feel safe. My thing is preventative. I'm trying to be preventative about it. You know, just like we don't have guys hanging out at the firehouse. They only respond if there's a call. I'm just asking if there's anything we could do to preventatively keep the staffing levels lower to the amount of people who are in the building at any given time, so that when somebody does get sick, God forbid they do, it minimizes the amount of exposure.
I agree with you, but like I said, I will going to review this tomorrow with the deputy chief, and we can make those adjustments. But like I said, that's the first I'm hearing any concerns, and I understand. We've been down there ourselves a couple of times, having discussions with them, giving them updates, and so no, we'll look and review and all that, and look at things differently. Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, Dave Bitso. Chief, I want to just reiterate what John said. No one's approached me on this. I just heard what happened in Ansonia. And the reason why this is the first you're hearing about it is because we haven't met in 2 months. We haven't talked at all. So this is the first time, we're having any kind of conversation about what happened over the last 6 weeks. And I just got to believe that at least a couple of these guys could work from home with the technology that we have today. I mean, one of our detectives is our IT guy. So, that's all.
Any other comments? Commissioner Koskolowski, any other comments? Okay. Chief, Commissioner Koskolowski, Chief, I'm just requesting, look into see what you could do in Detective Bureau so that these individuals are working in a more safer environment.
Absolutely. We'll review that tomorrow. Chief Satkowski speaking. I will review that tomorrow and make some adjustments. Not a problem.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Koskolowski, number 9, Commissioner's comments. Start with you, Dave Bitzel.
Dave Bitso, I'm good right now, Mr. Chair.
Okay. John Duke.
I have nothing at this time.
Kyle Kelly.
This is Kyle. I'm good. Thank you.
Tom Bennett.
This is Tom Bennett. The only thing I would say, Mr. Chairman, is food for thought. It seems to be that maybe we could use a little more information every now and then. So I don't know, would we consider maybe an emergency meeting of the board at some point within 2 weeks, just so we're not going a whole nother month again, considering the pandemic at this point? I'm pretty sure we're within Robert's rules on that to declare an emergency meeting or another special type meeting.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Brian Leclerc, the town attorney's
Yes.
office. An emergency meeting, it would not be the appropriate type of meeting. That is a meeting that is called on less than 24 hours notice when there's a true emergency being faced by a governmental entity. I think what Commissioner Bennett is speaking of is properly called a special meeting. Yes, you can call a special meeting at any time with 24 hours, a minimum of 24 hours published notice of such a meeting. So yes, while you have your regular schedule of meetings posted for the entire year, your monthly meetings, there's no reason why you as chairman could not call a special meeting if necessary.
Mr. Chair, this is Kyle. I missed 2 things, if I may.
Yes.
One, as far as the meetings is concerned, and maybe being that the town attorney is here, he can help to answer some questions. Would it be feasible to have the chief, as he's started to do so, send out a weekly update to the board as far as what's going on? And I don't think we need to go with everything, but at least specific to this pandemic and COVID-19 related items. Unless somebody else thinks different. And if we have any questions, we can reach out to him directly or through the chair, rather than having a special meeting. That's just a thought. And one other thing I had, the last time I believe we met, I believe it was Commissioner Bennett that brought up about the pending and ongoing IAs and looking for numbers and what was going on with them. I just was wondering where we stand with that.
Mr. Chairman, it's Brian Leclerc from the Town Attorney's Office. Do you want me to respond to Mr. Kelly's first question? If you do, let me know.
Yes, yes, Brian.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Brian Leclerc. Commissioner Kelly, yeah, you raise a valid question. So as not to violate the Freedom of Information Act, you clearly can request that the chief submit a memorandum or a letter to you as commissioners providing whatever information you ask him to provide to keep you updated absent having a meeting. You would only run afoul of the act if you were to start discussing with your commission members outside of a meeting items for which you have jurisdiction over. You can certainly call the chief anytime. An individual member could contact the chief or the deputy chief and ask them questions. That would not be an illegal meeting. If you were to start to group chatting or setting up a private Zoom meeting or a phone call or sending emails to all the commissioners and the chief, raising questions over which you had jurisdiction, that would in fact be an illegal meeting.
Thank you, Brian. Chairman Koskowski, what I will do is I'll look at calling a special meeting every 2 weeks if it's necessary, if enough information is coming out, or we should get more information so that we will have a legal meeting, and I will be willing to call a special meeting in 2 or 3 weeks, whatever the time frame is, whenever I think it's necessary. Hopefully, I'm hearing all different kinds of time frames when we're going to get back to be able. I mean, the latest one is May 20th, and then the next one is the end of May, and then the next one is June 1st. So I don't know when we're going to be able to meet in person again. Hopefully within another week or two. I don't know. But if anything comes up, I will call a special meeting. I have in the past, and I will in the future. Is there any other? Yes, Chief.
So obviously, when I sent out the update with the 5-page letter, there was response back that every 2 days. I think I've been trying to keep that up 2 to 3 days. Besides, obviously, the holiday week. I think that's been working out sufficient enough. I don't know what everybody's thought is on that. But just to clarify, it was made. I think Commissioner Bitso said that they weren't updated, but. Yeah, just to clarify, no disrespect, but the chair would stop in and we would have conversations. So it's my understanding that some of the information that I informed the chair was passed on, and so that just might be miscommunication. But I think we've overcome that, and we'll continue to keep you updated. But it's a 2-day thing, okay? So I guess. I don't know if that's been working out for you, Committee Chair, or.
Yeah, Bob Koskowski, Chair, Chief. Yes, you could update us every 2 days just to give us an update of what's going on, especially with the virus going on. But keep all the board members informed of what's going on, because they'll give us a hint whether or not we should have a special meeting in the near future or not, depending on how serious everything's going on. But I think Tom Bennett's comments that we should be meeting probably every 2 or 3 weeks at this time. Hopefully we can meet in person in the very near future. But just keep us updated. When I talk to you, Chief, in your office, I go over with the board members what we discuss. Usually I keep them updated. If you give me any updated information, I advise the board members. I usually tell the vice chair, and the vice chair will get a hold of other members, and I'll get a hold of Tom Bennett. I've been trying to email him at times, or I did try calling him at a certain time, just trying to keep him updated of what's going on too. But nothing is over the last 3 months, nothing because of this virus that's going on. I haven't been meeting with you. So I really can't give them any updates.
Rightfully so. Chief Satkowski, rightfully so.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Chief.
No, I agree with you 100%. Coming here is, obviously try to stay out of the environments that could be infectious, if you will. So I do not, but anybody ever has any comments, questions, concerns, I think you all have my number. So please feel free to call me anytime. I always have my phone on me. I can be reached by email, phone, and even if you have, something comes up in those emails or personal questions, feel free to call me anytime. So.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Any other comments from the commissioners?
Just
Okay.
that, this is Kyle, just that question about the IAs, going back to, I believe, our
Yes.
last meeting that Commissioner Bennett brought up.
Yes.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. The Chief Sakowski speaking. So I do have that here. The question was how many pending internal affairs investigations. So right now there is currently 6 pending. 3 has to do with one officer that is currently out. Another one has to do with another person that's out, and then there's 2 pending from officers here. So 6 that are pending.
Dave Bitzo, Chief, does that include IAs that might be put on hold? 2 months ago, it was mentioned that quite a few were put on hold. So does that number 6 include IAs that are on hold as well as current ones that are active? So you have a total of 6
Yes.
altogether that are not closed?
Yes, 6. And then obviously with some recent incidences and those accidents, those will be looked into. So there will be more coming with those. So that's probably pending. 4 that have been put on hold, and then two that the Deputy Chief is working on currently.
Chief Tom Bennett here.
Hi.
When you said there's the 2 accidents, are those the 2 accidents you were referring to earlier? Those are considered internal affairs investigations?
Yes. So anytime a cruiser is involved in an incident, and this has been a long-standing practice and policy and procedure, I think it was implemented from previous boards. And ever since I've been an administrator, from the previous chief, accidents are always looked into, and so those will be looked into and done. Yes.
Chief Tom Bennett, and what's your thought about that on making those accidents internal affairs investigations? Because I know it's just you and the deputy chief at this point. Do you feel as though that's a good use of your guys' time and your resources? Do you feel as though they need to be investigated as an internal affairs, or should that be just a regular accident report that's investigated by the supervisor who goes out there? And if he determines the officer's not at fault like they would do in a normal accident, wouldn't that be a better use of time to just say, hey, open and close, done there, instead of doing a full-blown IA on it?
Yeah, I mean, that could be revisited and reviewed, but like I said, I think this came from previous action. So I think what's happened in the past was it actually, I think, came from the union, because years ago, I think there were some issues from union points of views, meaning it was raised like, oh, so officer had an accident, you didn't look into it, and then another officer had an accident, you looked into it and took action. So I think that's where that came from years ago, that all accidents would be looked at in the same way, in the same fashion, and in the same procedure. Just because there's an IA doesn't mean the officer did anything wrong. I mean, some of them are clear cut, open and shut. Some are a little more involved. So, it is important that the supervisor goes out, the supervisor does a report. We always require the officer to do a report anytime, obviously, a vehicle or equipment is damaged. And then, obviously, I think it's more for documentation purposes. And I think it became an issue years ago because there were discrepancies, and then the department took the action to say, okay, all accidents will be an internal affairs investigation. And then that's kind of the way it's been. So.
Tom Bennett again, Chief. Listen, I'm only trying to save some, save you guys some extra work there. It just sounds like, I don't know, it's kind of unnecessary. I would just leave it up to the supervisor to decide whether a person's at fault or not. And I think it would save yourself and the deputy chief some time. And also, you're not going to have a bunch of IAs that are coming back unfounded for no reason. It just seems like that's going to put your internal affairs investigation number it kind of a false high, if you would. I don't know, just my thoughts on that. I don't know if I'm off base, if anybody else has thoughts on that or not.
Commissioner Koslowski, I agree with Tom. I don't think IAs have to be on every single incident that happens over the police department. I think it ought to be handled through the chief's office or the deputy chief's office. Even what Tom said earlier, the supervisor that's on the shift where the patrolman or the vehicle was in an accident should treat it as a motor vehicle accident, look at it and see whose fault it was. And if it was the officer's fault, it would be so noted. It was the officer's fault that caused that accident. I don't think we should be wasting time and personnel on IAs on situations like that. That's my personal opinion. I agree with Tom that it's really something that, even though it was done in the past, doesn't mean the past was right.
I agree. This is Kyle. I agree with both the chair and with Commissioner Bennett. You know, over the year and a half or so that I've been really following, the meetings and trying to stay in the loop, it just seems like there's a ton of IAs that, in my opinion, and I think in a couple other people's opinion, that aren't necessary. The police department, and correct me if I'm wrong, does accident reports all the time, and they leave it up to the officers to determine fault, right? And that comes down to it. And I don't see why at the very least, the supervisor, if it's a supervisor or a sergeant that gets into the accident, then the commander takes care of it. If it's a commander, then it's a deputy chief. If it's a deputy chief, then it's the chief. And if it's the chief, then we take it from there. But, all these IAs, I've always seen IAs of being not good, right? You get an IA about something, and the other gentlemen on the call that have been in law enforcement, or anybody else can correct me if I'm wrong, but typically if you get an IA punched on you, it's not just because you got hit by a drunk driver or a fleeing suspect. That wasn't your fault, But, so nonetheless, I agree with what the others had to say.
So, Chief Sarkowski speaking. I think some of the issues over the years have been that, a supervisor goes out and they investigate the accident, but are they, as long as it's done fairly and impartially and done the proper way? And I think there's been problems over the years where it hasn't been. It was found that it wasn't because that was their buddy, if you will, and they go out and they're over each other's houses. You can see where that becomes a problem. So that's why I think some of these issues were implemented over the years to alleviate, favoritism or things not being done properly. And in this day and age, and when you go to the IA schools and stuff, and everything is document, investigate, because then if you don't, and then you come back to find out there's more to that story than just maybe a simple accident, then obviously, there's other issues that come along with that. So whatever the board wants to do, if they want to direct me not to do internal affairs investigations for accidents, that's what I'll do. But again, I think that become a problem down the road if it's not done, investigated properly by the people at the time. So again, these are, I think, why some of these were put into place, that all accidents are investigated, and no matter how minor. So
Bob Koslowski, chairman of the board. My only comments on that is that over the past 3 years, we've made a lot of different promotions and assigned different personnel in different positions. And I have enough faith in our promotions that they're going to do an honest and fair job, whether or not they're friends of someone or not. And I really believe that the officers will be true to doing what they have to do legally And we do have officers that do say that if something goes wrong, they'll handle it. And it should be, a lot of supervisors should be handling a lot of situations that are under IAs. I really believe the supervisors, either the commander or the sergeant, should be handling a situation, but it seems like everything gets a ticket punch for. So I agree with Tom Bennett that I don't think minor motor vehicle accidents like that should be investigated through IAs. It should be investigated by the supervising officer. That's just my comments. Any board
Chief
members
Sec-
have any other comments concerning it? Yes, Chief.
Chief Sekowski again. So that was my next thing. What's the criteria, right? So is it going to be property damage? Is it going to be the amount of damage to the vehicle? These are just things that come into play. Injury, so there's other things that is looked at here. What's going to be the criteria whether an accident gets investigated or not investigated? Culpability, whether the officer has culpability or not, that's all I'm bringing out to the things that are looked at in these situations. So.
If I may, this is Kyle again. I think everybody should be careful of how we're talking, right? I have all the faith in the officers in the department. I think all the officers in the department do a job, and they're trained to do a job, and the town hired them to do a job. We hired them to do a job, and they took an oath to do a job. From you, Chief, right down to whoever the last officer was that was hired. And if there's question on the integrity of what they're going to do, should and when the need arise for a supervisor to investigate a subordinate, then I think that's another need for discussion. I think there's a lot of things that, the supervisors are there, the sergeants and the commanders are there, and that rank structure is there to oversee and take care of their shifts. And sometimes that includes, discipline where it needs to be, but it seems like everything turns into an IA rather than the sergeant on the shift taking care of a whatever it may be, or the commander taking care of it. And, I'm going to bring one up. There was the incident on Main Street that I happened to be driving by and witnessed 3/4 of it that turned into a big IA. And a bunch of people got pulled into an IA. There were 2 supervisors on the call that saw what happened. In my opinion, there was no need for an IA on that. If anything, one of the officers should have filed charges against the person that was being spoken to. So there's IAs all the time. I mean, I wonder how many IAs were done on a year's total last year that didn't need to be and could have simply been taken care of by either the shift supervisor, the sergeant, or the commander having a conversation or putting something on, paper, whether it's a verbal warning or a written warning, and it being taken care of. And forgive me if I may, but Chief, you've gotten into a couple accidents. You've had a couple accidents with your car. Were there IAs punched on all those? And I don't know. I'm asking the question.
Chief Sekowski speaking. Yes. So I had one incident, and I received a counseling member or a written warning, whatever the chief gave me at the time. Yes. So obviously it was me. So who's going to do my internal affairs, right? So it would be the chief. So whatever the chief did, I was no different than anybody else. I received I think a written warning, or I'm pretty sure it was a written warnings, right? So
was that? I'm sorry, this is Kyle again. Was that the one over on Main Street, or was that when you got rear-ended?
I'm talking about the one over at the firehouse there.
Oh, I was talking about the one on Main Street when somebody hit you and when you got rear-ended over by Tony's Diner.
I'm not sure what was done on that one. So obviously,
That's just
again,
my point.
that involved the chief, right?
Yeah,
So
it's just one of the things. Those were two
I don't know who would do that investigation. Would that be the board? Would I sign my deputy? I don't think one was done. I researched that, but again, what criteria do you want to use? And so if the officer has culpability, we would do one, or we think if we have culpability, that's
my
all I'm
opinion.
saying.
This is Kyle again. My opinion: if something comes up and a supervisor needs to investigate something or take action against something, if there's warrant for negligence in whatever the case may be, that it needs to be kicked up to NIA or to the commander to make that call, or to the deputy chief or the chief to make that call. That's my opinion. Tom, if I may, you were on the job for quite a long time, right? What are your thoughts as far as what constitutes an IA and what doesn't?
Listen, I'm going to go by the general statement of a motor vehicle accident is going to be investigated per Connecticut general statutes, no matter what. There has to be an accident investigation for that. And whoever's found deemed to be at fault, the appropriate law enforcement action is going to be taken at that point by the investigating officer, which I think we can all agree with that whenever an accident like that takes place, it's going to be fully investigated and the appropriate motor vehicle action will be taken at that point. Beyond that, I think short of gross negligence on the part of the officer, that in terms of not getting ourselves inundated here with internal affairs investigations and a lot of unnecessary paperwork, I think as long as the supervisor doesn't think there's extenuating circumstances that cause that would determine an IA, which I believe all our commanders and supervisors are capable of making that decision to say, there's something more here than meets the eye. This needs to be investigated in an internal affairs investigation. Or, hey, this is as simple as somebody got rear-ended at a stop sign, and that's the end of it. I don't see a need to be doing all kinds of extra paperwork for something like that.
No, this is Kyle again. I think, at the very least, I think it's easy to say that unless the supervisor deems it necessary, then there shouldn't be any IAs punched for simple motor vehicle accidents involving, the members of the department and the vehicles, unless there's something for just cause, right? If, like you said, if there's something there that the supervisor's like, listen, or even if the supervisor says, you know what, I don't want to do the wrong thing, or, I might be tempted, they turf it to another supervisor, or they kick it up to an IA. But
Tom Bennett again here, and I agree with that. And I do understand the chief's statement that maybe there was favoritism in the past and things weren't looked at properly. But listen, if people aren't doing the right thing, we're never going to stop that, because whether it's an officer, their next door neighbor, their friend's wife, their friend's girlfriend, their friend's boyfriend, no matter what it is, if the right thing's not being done, the right thing's not going to be done for everybody. So I can't just say that the cops are the only ones going to get the favoritism. I can't look at it like that. I'm sorry.
Dave Bitso, I'd like to just add my 2 cents here. Chief, I support you on wanting criteria. I understand that, and I don't blame you for it. But I think the criteria, we just heard what the criteria should be. It needs to be something severe, something really serious to warrant an IA. And I think our sergeants, our commanders, our deputy chief and yourself would step in if something was that serious, if there was a fatality, if there was some serious damage done. But a basic motor vehicle hit and run, I agree with these guys on. I think we need to put the focus on where it needs to be.
So if I may, if we need it, I'll make a motion that, the motion could be as far as IAs are concerned in motor vehicle accident within a department, unless the supervisor deems it necessary, that it's investigated by the supervisor and taken care of that way.
Motion by Kyle. Do I have a second?
Yeah, it's John Duke. I'll second that.
Motion is second. First, it's not on the agenda. So first I need a motion to place that on the table so we could make a motion on that.
I'll make the
I
motion.
have a motion to place IA motor vehicle accidents on the agenda.
Kyle, I'll make the motion.
John
Tom,
Duke, I'll second it.
Motion by Kyle,
Yeah, I'll second that, John Duke.
second by John Duke. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Dave
Kyle,
Bitso, aye.
Kyle, Sakowski. Before you do the vote, I
Yes.
just have Chief Sakowski.
This is just to place it on the table, chief.
Okay. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
John Duke, aye.
Okay, motion was 5-0 to place this item on the table to discuss and make a motion if possible. Yes, chief, did you want to say something before Kyle makes a motion? You should really wait until he makes a motion and then you can have it under discussion. Kyle, do you want to make that motion now?
Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman,
so-
if you could just announce the vote on adding it to the table, please. It's Brian Leclerc.
He did.
He did.
Yes,
Did you-
Brian.
I didn't come across. I'm sorry, I missed
He
that.
did.
It came across. Thank you.
So I make the motion as far as IAs are concerned in the police department regarding officers in motor vehicle accidents, that they are investigated by the supervisor and only initiated an IA should the supervisor deem it necessary.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that, John Duke.
Second, John Duke. Discussion. Chief, did you want to say
Yes,
something?
Chief Sakowski, yes. So as I said, I think these became issues earlier from previous years, right? So obviously IAs are done for a reason, right? So I don't know how much people have experience in IAs, but you know, when there's an incident with an officer, usually you say, hey, come to my office. I need to ask you some questions. As soon as they come in, one of the first things they say is this a union issue? Because I want union representation, right? So then once they do that, then, then they have some protections, right? So obviously the purpose of IA is to compel them. You got to read and bring them in, you start an IA, you give them their Garrity rights, and then they have to tell you what happens. Because without doing that and having Garrity rights and doing a formality, they might not tell you the truth, or they might tell you the whole story, and then you're not getting the whole story. So, those are some reason why there's IAs. So you can look into the incident, you compel the employee, and they have to answer your questions as to, okay, did this happen? Did this happen? How did this happen? And again, that goes back to why IAs are done, or one of them. As the chief of police, I don't think that should be left to a first line supervisor determining whether an employee gets investigated or not. That's my position as the chief of police. I think it's clear in my chief of police job description as to my duties and responsibilities as the chief of police, that people get investigated. If I determine that an investigation needs to be done, then that comes from my office and not from a first line supervisor at the lower level. That comes from my office based on my job duties and responsibilities as the chief of police that I'm responsible for. Because when things are not done properly, it's coming back to me in my office and my desk. And then obviously, so I think that is, we're going down a dangerous road there. And I can't support that, so.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief Tom Bennett, and just so I want to have open discussion here. So let's take the incident in hand the other night where an officer goes to check on somebody parked up in the woods. The car takes off out of the woods now, and I'm going to make some assumptions here, sideswipe the patrol car on the way out and then take off. So now you respond to the scene, and you as the chief say to the officer, hey, what happened here? I'm doing an IA on this. And the officer says, sorry, chief, I'm not going to answer your questions right now because this is an internal affairs investigation and I have a right to protection. Where is if I was the officer on the scene and that just happened and the supervisor rolls up and says, hey, Tom, what happened? Hey, I don't know. I went to check on the car. The guy took off, sideswiped my car on the way out. So and again, I want to give you a different version of it as to how to think about it. In my own mind, I just don't think that every single motor vehicle accident needs to be investigated as an IA. And Chief, I say that for your benefit because I think that you guys have enough to do administratively at this point. I think there's enough internal affairs investigations that need to be done. In simple car accidents, I don't think they need to be made, for lack of a better term, a federal case out of them. And listen, nobody's taken the right away from you to be able to say, well, something's fishy to me there. And as long as you got a reason to say, hey, I think this needs to be an internal affairs investigation, I don't think anybody's saying that you can't make it one if you think that something is wrong with just cause.
Thank you. Is there any other comments from the board members? Okay, we're going to vote on the motion now. Everybody say aye or nay.
Kyle, aye.
Dave Bitso, aye.
Aye.
Tom Bennett, aye.
And Bob, aye. Motion passes 5-0. Is there any other commissioners' comments? I hope not. I mean, is there any more comments? Okay. Moving on, union business. John Oskowski, do you have any union business?
Okay, yes. So I'd like to comment on the IAs. So for 2019, we had a total of 17 IAs. The union has only gotten a few back from then. We have 11 of them that are still pending. We don't have any final completion on those. I stopped by the chief's office on the 3rd of April requesting the final outcome on those 11 IAs. And I still haven't received anything from the chief as of this point. We will have some grievances coming once we get those final copies. So we are waiting on those. As of 2000, we have 4 IAs right now that are punched. We're still waiting on the completion of those also. And the IAs, you know, we agree with the commissioners with the accidents. You can't, you know, an officer hitting, a coyote, that's out of his control. Stuff like that, we agree with you guys on. But we would like to get the final copies on the IAs if possible. They're about a year overdue now, so we can get those. That would be great.
Dave Bitso, I got a question for Christine. I mean, for John. So if I can add correctly, I just heard 7 and 4. So you're saying there's 11 open IAs?
So yeah, there's 3 on hold, like the chief said.
Okay.
We agreed on that.
But they're still open.
There's 3 that are still open. We agreed on that. Deputy Chief Frazier and I had spoke before a couple months ago, and they were put on hold until the officer came back.
Okay, so to me, Dave Bitso again, to me, either an IA is open or it's closed. Pending to me is still open. It's just put on hold. Okay, so you said there was 7 and then another 4. That's
Right.
11?
There's a total of 17 for 19, the year of 19.
Yeah.
I think we have 11 that I don't have a final copy of the charges or, you know, whatever happened to the outcome
Okay.
there. And then we have 3 that are on hold.
Okay.
And we have 4 that we do have answers for, or 3 or 4 that we do have answers for, yes. So,
Because I believe at the February meeting, when we asked the question of the Deputy Chief Frazier, he said 2 or 3. That's when we asked for it to be clarified and double checked at the next meeting, which is tonight. So there's a difference here of the 6 that the chief says we have versus the 11 and 4 that you have.
right. Yeah.
Okay.
So Chief Sadkowski speaking, if I may. I went over this with Deputy Chief Rinaldi. We came up with 6. As I said, there's 2 could be 2 or 1 more pending. All right, so that, I don't know if John, are you counting those? I'm not sure if you're counting pending ones, but
I'm talking, we do not have a copy for 11 for last year, which was like whatever you, even if you completed it, we still don't have the final outcome for our side, for our records to say, hey, no, we're going to file a grievance on this, or we're just going to say, okay, that's what the officer got. So we need something on the union side saying, okay, this guy got disciplined. Should we fight the discipline or shouldn't we? We don't have a final outcome to what you had made on your decision. That's what I asked you for on the 3rd of.
all right, so Chief Sadkowski speaking. So John, when you came to my office, you inquired about 3 specific ones, and I left you those copies in your box today. So I don't know if you got them or not, but you asked for 3 specific, and that's what I gave you. You did not ask for all of them for 2019. So I gave you specifically what you asked for. And I said to you that day also that if there was any discipline taken, then the officers got a copy of that themselves. And if there was no discipline taken, I believe the deputy chief just informed the officer that said, hey, that IA has been cleared, no action taken. And so there wouldn't be any documentation documented unsubstantiated. So unless it was a civilian complaint, and then obviously, you know, there's a little different dynamics than actual civilian complaint, but anything internal, if the deputy chief cleared it, he cleared it with, you know, unsubstantiated, and the officer was notified verbally, and there wouldn't be anything in his file or her file, if you will. So,
But if there's an IA punched and there's it's done completely, there has to be
State
something.
your name, John.
John Oskowski. There would have to be something documented at the completion saying if it's unfounded or not. I mean, why would we just give it a say, okay, you know?
Right, Chief Sekowski, so that would be in the IA file itself. If no action was taken, it would say the case is basically closed out, unsubstantiated.
Right.
So, you know, so that's why there wouldn't be any documentation back to the officer besides her being verbally told by the deputy chief. So,
Right.
but I'll research that whole list and, you know, see where everything adds up. And, but prior to this meeting, Deputy Chief Rinaldi and myself had discussion, and those were the numbers that obviously we discussed and he gave me, because obviously he's doing them now. So he told me there was the numbers I gave you, the 4 on hold, and then 2 others. So,
I mean, if you'd like, we can sit down and go through them and see what you have, what I have, and come up with the final completion.
yeah, I mean, Chief Sekowski, I'll do that next week. And then it's not a problem. I will go through my list. I will go through everything. And I don't know, Deputy Chief Rinaldi, if you want to.
Deputy Chief Rinaldi here. Commissioner Bitzo, on that with the IAs for 2020. 2 of the tickets were punched after the last meeting in February. So that's why we have 4 right now pending. Pending and under investigation. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Dave Bitso, I'd just like to know how many have not been completed versus if they're on hold, if they're pending, if they're ongoing. How many are still open that are not closed?
Right now for this year, there's 2. I believe there's 2. And from last year, I just finished the one from last year. So it's, you know, right now with what I have are 3 that are open. But 1's done. And I'm going to give it to the chief tomorrow or Friday. And then there's 2 pending ones.
Hey,
Dave Bitso again.
Not
So
the
that,
Chief Rinaldi, I'm sorry.
Dave Bitso. So where's well, I think, you know, Mr. Oskowski and the chief need to sit down and because somehow I'm hearing 12 to 4, you know, 12 to 13 or whatever. I'm hearing 2 or 3. So there's a big difference here. I mean, these are IAs. These, you know, they can't be lost or misplaced.
No, they're not lost. We have them.
hey, it's Tom Bennett.
Chief Rinaldi, I'm sorry.
Tom Bennett, can I interject here for a second?
Go ahead, Tom.
And I brought this up at one of the meetings when I asked about the internal affairs. Has there been an annual internal affairs report done by the department at all? And the reason I think that,
I'll tell you, as chairman, I never received the annual report, but what concerns me is what was stated earlier is 2019, there was 17 IAs. We're that bad? I can't believe 17 IAs in 1 year? What kind of training are we giving our officers?
Tom Bennett, Mr. Chairman, and I think just so we can all get on the same page here, I mean, the rule book on page 37 for the Seymour Police Department is pretty clear that an annual report will be done by the chief or his designee. And that summary will include the number of complaints received, the number of complaints sustained, the number of complaints unfounded, the types of complaints received, and the type of action taken on sustained complaints. I mean, personally, I would like to see that information because as a board, I think it helps us determine if there is some type of issue that needs to be addressed by the board or not be addressed by the board. And secondly, just so I can go back to what the union president, John Oskowski, said, I want to make sure there's a clarification there. Are officers not getting notified of the status of their internal affairs investigations? Because I think that's important to the officer themselves, that they know that either A, that they did the right thing, or B, that they made a mistake and it's corrected. Because again, I want to go back to the rule book, and the rule book is clear about internal affairs investigations. And it says the accused employee shall be notified of the disposition of the complaint in writing by the chief of police. And this may be in the form of a letter or in a memorandum. So again, I think that would solve the problem that the union's having of whether there was discipline imposed or not imposed, or what the conclusion of that internal affairs. And I think it's only fair that the person accused is notified of the outcome of that internal affairs investigation, and they're not waiting a long period of time for it. And I yield back to the chairman.
Thank you. Since that is, and I'm glad you brought that up, Tom, because there's a number of issues in that police duty manual that we have to start following, because it's a big book, a lot of pages, and I'm glad you're on the board now, because it seems like you're reading quite a bit of it, and you're helping us as board members too, and our board members are reading quite a bit of it too. We should get that annual report. Chief, could you look into that, page 37? And if the board is supposed to get an annual report, can you please put one together for us so that we could start having that annual report given to us?
Yeah, so Chief Sekowski, it's not a problem.
Okay.
We have the documentation, there's nothing being hidden. It's all here. As I said, if the officer was cleared, they were more or less told verbally they were cleared. And if there was any type of action taken, whether that, obviously that would come into my office and or there'd be discussion or there, if there's a counseling memo or written warning or whatever else has taken place, that would either come from my office, either I would do it, or there's been a couple of times where I would tell the deputy chief, hey, just give him a counseling memo and discuss the case with them, and that's been done. So I firmly believe every officer or should have been known what's been done and had their case handled. So,
Deputy Chief Rinaldi here. I agree with the chief, and I've been in the office a few times when he's called somebody in and told them what disciplinary action was taken against them. So they have been notified.
How come the union wasn't notified? Excuse me, Chairman Goslowski, how come the union wasn't notified then?
They, Deputy Chief Rinaldi, we've talked to the employees and asked them if they want the union present, and they've made a decision not to. Whose responsibility would it be? The employee, the chief? I'm assuming both.
Okay.
To notify the union. Am I right or wrong?
So Chief Sekowski speaking. So if someone comes to my office, I basically explain the situation to them. I ask them, I tell them what it's about. I ask them if they want union representation. Some have chosen to, others say, no, I don't need it. I'll handle it myself. And they have their own reasons why they do that. So that's their prerogative. If they want to share it with the union president or not, again, that's their prerogative. And even if they were given a written warning or a counseling memo, they always get a copy of that. And I explained that to the president of the union that if they receive something, they have that copy. And I'm not sure why it wasn't shared with them, but I don't have a problem. We'll get that straightened out. And
okay, Chief, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
John Oskowski, real quick.
Hold on. Joe Denigris, Vice President. Joe Denigris, Vice President, Local 564.
Yes.
I just want to point out that it's pretty clear within the union contract, I believe, I would have to double check, but I'm 95% sure that the contract actually states that management to notify the union after a first step. So I understand that they may call in an employee that maybe is a little favored by the chief and nothing goes on wrong and he's cleared. I understand that those notifications are made, but if there's a written warning, or the union needs to be notified when these actions are taken. And I think that's what the question is. We had 17 IAs in 2019, and we only have notification for 4 of them, I believe. And 3 of them were on between management and the union to extend. But, I mean, we're still looking at 11 IAs. The union has no idea what took place.
Okay, Chairman, Chairman Koslowski, wait a minute, Chairman Koslowski. Okay, we have a number of IAs. Hopefully we could get to the bottom of this. For our next meeting, please give us an accurate number of what IAs meet with the union, know exactly how many IAs have not been turned over to the union for action, or employees who refuse to have the union representative. I can't understand why they would do that, but that's their choice if they so choose it. John, do you have any more union business?
Yes. So on that current IA that was punched today on the accident, I know you guys voted to the supervisor investigate it. Will that accident that involving the side swipe, is that IA going to stand, or is that going to be taken care of by the supervisor?
But we just made the motion tonight, so I got to say that's going to be the chief's decision to make that decision whether it continues as an IA. But from this day forward, they're not going to be IAs. They're going to be, the supervisor will investigate them. So if the chief wants to turn this back over to the supervisor and not do the IA on it, I don't understand why a hit and run should be an IA, but this is something the chief's going to have to make a decision on.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Deputy Chief Rinaldi here. That IA is not, has nothing to do with the hit and run. It has to do with an accident last week.
So here's
in Derby.
Chief Sakowski speaking. So yeah, one of our officers again was in an accident out of town. Okay, and for whatever reason, I find out today there is no report on it. There's no accident report. No supervisor went out and looked at that because it happened in another town. So, you know, we can only go based on the officer's, I guess, his version of what happened. Same thing with the one last night. Okay, that's the officer's version of what happened. But you know, sometimes internal affairs investigations, when it's looked into a little deeper, and I'm not saying that's the case with this one, but I'm saying past history, other cases. You know, sometimes, you know, if you're only hearing one side of the story, how do you know that's the whole story? Okay, you know, because, you know, that person could claim, oh, I was pulling out and the officer hit me, okay? And then the officer is saying, oh, well, they hit me. So, and I know there's an accident investigation and stuff, but that's what, you know, sometimes internal affairs investigations looks at, you know, a little more in depth and obviously through interviewing and stuff. So that's just my comment on some of that stuff.
But. Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Koslowski, I just want to make a comment here. You talk about an accident that happened a couple of weeks ago and there's no report on it. Well, if it happened in another town, then shame on the police department in that town for not investigating that accident and doing a report. You know, it isn't the officer's fault. He was in an accident and it should have been called in. If it wasn't called in, so be it. But I'm just saying that if an accident happens out of Seymour, one of our officers are going to training or something, and whatever town it's in, that department, that police department is going to investigate that accident. There should be an accident report on it. So I don't understand why an IA has to be reported and why there was no accident report filed. But anyways, this is a situation that's under investigation, and we really shouldn't go too deep into this.
Commissioner, real quick, that accident was reported to the supervisor as soon as it happened, our supervisor, and the town of Derby was contacted as well. at the time of the accident.
Okay. Okay, is there any other union business?
Pending all the IAs stuff, not at this point, nope.
Okay. Board members. Last one is, there's no other commissioners' comments. Last one is to go into executive session for personnel discussion of internal investigation of employee. I'm going to ask the town attorney to help me on this
And
one.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, on that, Brian Leclerc, Town Attorney's Office, under the Connecticut General Statutes, one of the reasons that this body can go into an executive session is for a discussion concerning the employment, performance, or dismissal of a public officer or employee, provided such individual may require that any such discussion be held at an open meeting. Just to let you, what that means, Mr. Chairman, is before going into executive session, the employee who would be subject to such discussion must be consulted regarding his consent to any discussion being held about him or his case in executive session. Absent the employee consenting, it would be improper to go into executive session. In this case, I just want to remind you that this is not an actual hearing. You cannot start your actual hearing this evening in connection with the subject officer and the internal affairs investigation and your correspondence to the commission. It has been the practice of this commission to hold the actual hearings in executive session in past cases with the subject employee present at that time and prior notice, obviously, to the officer. The officer, of course, always has the opportunity to request that the hearing be made in public. So this evening, you cannot begin again the actual hearing regarding the employee. If the officer does consent, you can go into executive session without his presence, but that is only to discuss the procedure that this body will follow in connection with the hearing that must be conducted at this point. If the employee does not consent, you can have this discussion on the record, but again, only about the procedure that's going to be followed. You cannot get into a substantive discussion at this time, since you as the commission are the hearing body, and you should not begin that discussion without the officer present for all of the discussion. He needs to have an opportunity to be present and be heard at any discussions, at any evidentiary presentations involving his case. The only thing he would not be present for is the actual deliberations. So if that answers your question, I think the employee must be consulted as to whether he requires that the discussion regarding the procedure this evening be held at an open meeting rather than executive session before you can entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Yeah, that's the reason why I asked that the employee be here tonight, so that I will ask him if he would like to, because it automatically goes in executive session under FOI. The only time it goes in open session, that's if the employee wants it in open session.
That's correct. That is correct. The employee
Okay.
may require the discussion be held in an open session, but he needs to be present to make that affirmative.
Right,
to
he
answer
is
that question
present
this
tonight.
evening.
Right, he is present
Yes.
tonight, and the union's present tonight. So the reason for going into executive session is to set a date for a hearing, number one, but we want to ask the union about that date also. And also whether or not the letter that I received as of today from the chief concerning the IA, can I share that in executive session with the board?
Well, yes, that letter could certainly be shared with the board. And I just remind you, on freedom of information, under the Freedom of Information Act, the report, that letter and the report regarding the investigation would be subject to the act and most likely would be disclosed upon request by anyone or the press. So that will probably become public in due course.
Okay. So in other words, this letter, even though it's just that was given to me as chairman of the board for the Board of Police Commissioners, this letter becomes public information, even though we did it in an executive session?
Yeah, well, it's going to have to become part of your record. You shouldn't be Correct. This is going to have to become part of the record in this case, the public record in this case. The letter from the chief
Okay.
outlining the charges against the employee.
Okay. So let me get this clear now. We could go in executive session. I will ask the employee if he would like to be in open session. If he would have it in open session, we would do this in open session then, correct?
Correct. And again, the only thing we can discuss, we cannot discuss the substantive charges. All you can discuss this evening is the procedure that you will follow as a commission. You cannot get into the officer's been charged with this because of the following. That would be substantive. I was just going to walk you through the collective
I understand
bargaining
that.
agreement. So whether you want to go in executive at all for that is your decision. We could do that in the public just as well, discussing your timeline, the 10 days, the 30 days, 21 days, et cetera.
Yeah, but you said that I could share this letter. The letter includes the charges that the employee's being charged with.
Correct.
So this could be done in executive session, correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. You could tell the commission the charges and then discuss your scheduling of the hearing on the charges.
Yeah,
but we
that's
can't
all I wanted to do.
substantively discuss any more than what the charges are in the letter.
No. Just gonna let the board be aware of what I received today.
Mhm.
Now, can I ask the employee if he would like that in in open session?
You should do that, Mr. Chairman, under the law, yes.
Joe DeNigris, would you like to have this in open session or executive session? Or you don't have choice of executive. It goes in executive automatically. If you want open, then it'll be open.
Yeah, Inspector DeNigris can request under the statute that any discussion regarding the procedure be held at the open meeting rather than executive session. He can make that.
Yeah, he could ask that. Yep.
Yes, sir.
Joe DeNiris. Mr. Chairman, I have no problem with open session, but may I have a 30-second, I guess, table to contact? I want to call my attorney, Mr. Bento, that's also here, and to speak to him. It'll take 30 seconds.
Would you like me to ask him or you want to just ask him?
Well,
I think Inspector DeNigris is asking that you call a
Right,
brief
right.
recess so he can contact his attorney.
Oh, yes, he could. Yes.
literally 30 seconds so I can contact my attorney. Mr. Bento's here. He's on this Zoom with us.
Right.
Call him and speak to him privately quickly.
Yes. Yep.
All right. Thank you so much.
What you
Okay.
probably should do is mute that microphone for Mr. DeNigris, and we can all stay live. No one hang up. Don't lose the connection.
Sure.
Yeah, we're all going to stay on. We're all going to stay on. Okay, Joe, hurry up.
So, Commissioner Bennett here, Attorney Leclerc, just so I understand
Yes,
the process of this, we're only allowed to know the charges and not the allegations. Is that correct?
We can't discuss the charges. We could know what the charges are, but we can't discuss the charges.
Okay, so we're not informed of what the allegations are. We're only going to be informed of what the violation is.
What the violations are, what the accused is being accused of the violations, and I will read that into the record in the executive, into the executive, if it's executive session, I'll read that in executive session.
Isn't that the same thing? Charges or allegations, isn't that one and the same?
Not Commissioner Bennett here, not in my mind. So in other words, if somebody says you violate policy 1234, and let's say policy 1234 is not wearing a tie to work, or something to that effect, it's there's got to be an allegation behind the charge, or let's say the allegation is or not allegation, let's say the charge is misconduct. That's a very broad charge to me. Like, what's the allegation behind the misconduct? Is
Gotcha.
what I'm inquiring about. You know?
Excuse me a second, Deputy Chief Rinaldi here. Attorney Leclerc, you're muted. That's why they can't hear you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
And Commissioner Bennett, again, I was kind of directing those questions towards you, Attorney Leclerc, so I don't know if you heard him or not.
Yeah, no, I heard the questions. It's how we define, you're going to be advised of the actual charges, the specific chapters and the standards of conduct and the specific articles where a violation is alleged. Some of them will tell you the allegation, I suppose, to use your example,
Yes.
not wearing a tie for duty. If the officer's charge has to do with not wearing a tie, essentially the allegation is he didn't wear a tie. You would know some of them. If it was something like conduct unbecoming an employee, that's all you would know at this point. You wouldn't know yet because you've not received all the documentation what conduct allegedly would be unbecoming an employee.
Okay.
It's more of a semantics discussion, I believe.
Okay, Joe, you're back.
Yes, I am.
What would you like?
Joe DeNigris, yes, Mr. Chairman, I would request executive session, but I believe my attorney would like to just speak briefly prior to us going to executive session.
Okay, that's allowable. Yes.
Mr.
State your
Chair,
name for the record.
thank you. Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Anthony Bento, attorney for Local 564. So as Joe iterated, he would prefer to have it in executive session. We just want to make it clear that we haven't received any of the packet or the letter that you were seeking to read. We haven't received that, neither Joe nor the union. So we don't know what you're about to read.
Okay. Hopefully the chief will make sure that you get a copy of this tomorrow.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, Brian Leclerc, under the collective bargaining agreement, Article 5, all employees shall be confronted with any charges against them and obviously are given the opportunity to respond to those charges. Likewise, a copy of the charges, a list of all witnesses, and copies of statements and reports regarding the incidents shall be given to the union at least 7 days prior to the hearing. So both Inspector DeNigris, his counsel, and the union would get copies of these documents before the commencement of the actual hearing.
Okay, I do want to ask the union a question though. The union attorney's here, the union president, and Joe, you're here. We're going to set a date for the hearing, but because of what's going on, we do not want to have the hearing over a Zoom. We want to have the hearing in person. It's better to face people person to person and over a computer. Would the union be willing, because it says that we have to have it within 30 days. Is the union willing to extend that? Because under the duty manual, page 37, I believe, the union has a right, or the accused has a right ask for an extension. We don't have a right to ask for it, as I read the duty manual, but you do have a right. Would you be willing to extend that deadline?
Joe DeNigris, Tony, it's okay to answer?
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, obviously, of course, due to the circumstances, I have no problem with an extension for the hearing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now, Brian, can we go in executive session?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, yes, you would, based upon Inspector DeNigris's lack of request that your discussion regarding the procedure to be followed in connection with these allegations be held at an open meeting. Someone can make a motion to go into executive session to discuss the employment, performance, or dismissal of a public officer, and you'd have to indicate who the parties allowed in the executive session are. I would suggest that it would be the commission,
Okay.
myself,
Kyle,
and the chief.
did you want to say something?
I think you had a motion by Mr. Kelly, I believe.
Kyle, and do I have a second?
John Duke, I'll second it for executive
Okay,
session.
and who's going to be in executive session is all board members, our attorney, Joe, and his attorney, and the union president, if that's what you want.
Well, I thought you were going into executive session just to discuss the procedure. You're welcome to invite him in, but that's not necessary for procedure. We're not doing the hearing. If you'd like Inspector DeNigris in executive session, you may, but just to be clear, we're not starting the hearing tonight. We're only discussing the procedure.
Yeah, we could have them in executive session, correct?
A couple times. We're not starting the hearing. We're simply getting told what the letter says and setting
Yes,
it.
yeah,
That's
just
all.
what the letter says.
Joe,
And then when we come out of executive session, we will set a date for the hearing. Okay?
Yes, and do you want, who else is on the line? I'm looking at who else is on. You have the chief, you have the first selectman as well. You can invite into that.
Yeah, if anybody that should be involved in it, then they're more than welcome to be in executive session. If you feel they should be in executive session, so be it.
You may
So,
want, you should consider including those individuals as well.
so it should be the board members, Joe DeNigris, his attorney, the union president, and the first selectman,
Yes, and your
and the
police chief.
chief.
Yes, sir.
Is that who should be in executive session?
Yes, and perhaps your deputy chief, if the
And
chief-
deputy chief. But that's just about all of us. But anyways, okay, could I have a motion going, I do have a motion going executive session with the members I so stated in executive session. All in favor, say aye.
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 Don
Bennett.
Bennett.
And Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman,
so
you may
carried.
want to, it's Brian Leclerc, you may want to explain procedurally how this will occur, given we're on somewhat new ground here using a remote meeting. And that is that everyone who is going,
Take care of that, or Rory take care of that, we can.
if you could just explain, either Commissioner
Yep.
Kelly or Mr.
Yeah,
Burke, if you
go
could
ahead.
explain what people
Go ahead,
should do.
Yep, so everybody that's not going in executive session, stay where you are. We're going to basically take everybody else out of the meeting. I'll have control of the meeting for the duration that we're in executive session. Rory is going to stop the recording. Once we come out, I'll give that control back over to Rory. He'll bring everybody back in and restart the meeting and restart the recording.
Okay, thank you.